Chapter 1251. The sudden change shocked Lu Zhai and his son. It was as if their hearts had skipped a beat. The two hurried over to support the old Feng Jun. When the old Feng Jun saw their nervous expressions, she couldn't help but reveal a comfortable smile. She knew that as the respected old Feng Jun of the entire family, no one dared to anger her or go against her wishes, much less her own son and grandson. As long as she was still in the Lu residence, she was the old Feng Jun that everyone respected and respected. Thinking of this, the old Feng Jun felt much better. Her soaring blood pressure and anger started to decrease. She shakily reached out to grab her son's hand. She was about to smile and say something, but she was too angry. A mouthful of thick phlegm surged up her throat. It rolled and didn't want to slide down, and she couldn't spit it out. After a while, her ruddy face turned pale, and then from pale to dark purple. The color quickly deepened. Her thin and sharp eyes widened, and the whites of her eyes were frightening. Her change was more serious than Lu Zhai and his son. They were even more afraid. Lu Hong said with a pale face, "Father, grandmother is probably blocked by phlegm." Lu Zhai hurriedly told his son to hurry the doctor. He helped the old Feng Jun stand up and patted her back. Because the old Feng Jun was having trouble breathing, she let out a heavy and hurried sound like a wild beast. Lu Zhai was so anxious that his eyes turned red. His hands and feet trembled, as if he had fallen into an ice cellar. No matter how bad his mother was, the person in front of him was his birth mother. Now that she was in such pain, of course he didn't feel good. Lu Hong didn't care about his appearance. He lifted his clothes and jogged to invite the doctor to the main hall. When he arrived, he found a group of servants standing outside the main hall with their hands raised. Their expressions were sorrowful. Lu Hong's heart skipped a beat. His lips trembled and his legs went weak as he entered the room. The tip of his feet stepped on his clothes, and he stumbled forward. The doctor carried a medical box and followed in. He saw Lu Hong almost fall and subconsciously reached out to pull him up. The doctor was a guest official that Lu Zhai had specially invited to the old Feng Jun's residence. He was in charge of diagnosing and treating the old Feng Jun. If the old Feng Jun had a headache or fever, he would be in charge of it. He was also the one who understood the old Feng Jun's condition the best. "Old Feng Jun, this is..." Lu Gui hugged the old Feng Jun with a pale face. She only came back to her senses when she heard the doctor's voice. Quick, let mother take a look," Lu Zhai urged the doctor. The doctor glanced at the old Feng Jun's appearance and came to a conclusion in his heart. He still went forward to take the old Feng Jun's pulse. The skin he touched was much lower than that of an ordinary person. There was no pulse at all. The doctor lifted the old Feng Jun's eyelids to look at his pupils. "Master, my condolences." He shook his head with a regretful expression. Lu Zhai's age could be considered to have entered old age, and it was best not to be struck by a sudden mishap and have one funeral turn into two. Thus, the doctor comforted Lu Zhai in a low voice. "Old Feng Jun is also a person of 70 years of age. Now that he has passed away, it could be considered a happy funeral. Old Feng Jun usually eats a lot of meat and fish. His diet is heavy, and he doesn't like to move around, so he often has headaches and dizziness. Just now, his anger attacked his heart, causing his heart and lungs to be damaged. His phlegm surged up, causing him to have difficulty breathing. Master, you should prioritize your health and not have such a huge change in emotions." The doctor had been a doctor for many years and was very experienced. He only needed to do a simple examination to know how the old Feng Jun had passed away. The old Feng Jun had lived like a prince for too long. His body was not suited for great joy or anger. Otherwise, it would be easy for his qi and blood to attack his heart, and medicine would be ineffective. He had lived in the Lu residence for many years and knew the temperament of the few masters in the residence. The doctor did not believe that Lu Zhai had angered the old Feng Jun to death. Everyone knew how filial Lu Gui was to her mother. The old Feng Jun's reputation was not good. Everyone in the residence knew that this old woman was not willing to suffer any losses. Even if she threw a tantrum, she would make people accommodate her. In terms of angering someone to death, it was more likely that Lu Gui had been angered to death by this old mother. The doctor glanced at the old Fengjuan's sorry figure. The other's face was dark purple, and now it was dyed with a deathly ash white. His slightly protruding eyes were bloodshot, and a mouthful of thick green phlegm hung from the side of his mouth. On the ground, there was a puddle of food residue and acid from his stomach. Lu Gui only came back to her senses after a while. Tears fell from her eyes, and her teeth bit her lower lip until it was white. Sobs flowed from her throat. Lu Heng watched from the side with worry. Grandmother had already passed away. If something happened to father, the entire family would collapse. Lu Gui cried for a while until she was out of breath. However, it was better to vent her sorrow than to keep it in her heart. After a while, Lu Gui said in a hoarse voice with a muffled sob, "Send someone to hold a funeral and set up a mourning hall." Lu Heng was silent for a while, and then asked Lu Gui with a troubled expression, "If we hold a funeral, was grandmother's death due to a dream, or, if it was a dream, then it was a normal death of old age, commonly known as death of old age. If it wasn't for this reason, then it was an abnormal death." It was a sensitive time, and the cause of the old Fengjuan's death would cause a huge uproar. Lu Gui raised his hand to wipe away his hot tears. He calmed himself down and instructed Lu Heng word by word. Mother fell into the hands of the bandits in Hejian County, and the people were attacked by the Huang bandits. They were anxious and fearful, and their old illness was triggered. Unfortunately, they passed away. Lu Heng's eyes widened slightly, as if he was seeing his father for the first time. Lu Gui seemed to understand his son's meaning. His lips twitched weakly, and he said as if he was crying, "If I don't say that, then should I tell the truth?" Lu Heng instantly understood his father's painstaking efforts. As long as outsiders saw the old Fengjuan's body, they would know that she had died an abnormal death. At such a sensitive time, it was hard to guarantee that no one would make an issue of it. Jiang Pengji was now independent. If someone intentionally misled her, Jiang Pengji would be labeled as unfilial, disobedient, and infuriating grandmother to death. Huang Song would definitely make an issue of it and use this point to attack Jiang Pengji, causing her to lose all standing and reputation. If that was the case, there would be no room for reconciliation between her and Lady Lu. It would be good if she didn't bear a grudge against her. Although Jiang Pengji had become independent, they were still of the same ancestor. If the bones were broken, the tendons were still connected. If they helped Huang Song attack Jiang Pengji, what benefits would they get in the end? Of course, if the benefits Huang Song offered were greater than what Jiang Pengji could offer, they could consider switching sides. However, the reality was that helping Huang Song was far inferior to helping Jiang Pengji. To prevent Huang Song's men from making an issue of the old Fengjuan's death, the Lu residents had to be the first to close the coffin and determine the cause of the old Fengjuan's death. "Yes, your son will do it now." Countless thoughts flashed through Lu Heng's mind. He didn't dare to delay and immediately dealt with the funeral. The old Fengjun was over 70 years old. In the words of a physician, this age was considered a happy funeral. The residents had already made mental preparations and prepared a coffin and other things. Although the death was sudden, the residence was still in order. The cause of the old Fengjuan's death was also spread. Chapter 1252. Suddenly hearing that the old lord had passed away, Feng Ju and Cheng Jing's thoughts reached a high degree of unity. Take the opportunity to stir up trouble. There was much to be done here. However, Lu Zhai was shrewd. He had long thought of this possibility and concluded the old lord's death in advance. If he had been a step later, the news of an unfilial granddaughter separating from the family and the death of her 70-year-old grandmother would have spread far and wide. Feng Ju sneered. It seems that the Lu family's foothold in Hejian County is not entirely based on luck. Cheng Jing put his hands in his sleeves and looked at Feng Ju calmly. After all, they are gentry. It is their nature and instinct to seek benefits and avoid harm. This was considered a crisis public relations. The Lu family's response to this matter was commendable. The corners of Feng Ju's lips curled into a sneer. There was a hint of mockery in his words. With this, the Liu family is completely safe. The old lord was the old lord of the Liu family. She had a special meaning to the entire clan. Her funeral was also the funeral of the entire clan. Huang Song did not want to be criticized by the world and be reviled in the history books. Naturally, he could not let anything happen to the Liu family during the funeral of the old lord. This was a disguised death exemption medallion. Cheng Jing's eyelids darkened. He said coldly, "It's just a petty trick." He had done a good job of creating a funeral crisis. He had indirectly attacked Huang Song and protected himself. At the same time, he had expressed his goodwill to Jiang Pengji and helped her find a reason to send troops. After this matter, even if Jiang Pengji did not put the Liu family in an important position, she could not completely leave the Liu family to rot. When Huang Song knew about this, he immediately put on a bitter face. After a long while, he let out a long sigh and instructed his wife, Qi Chaolan, to help him prepare a small memorial gift. Lady Qi asked him, "Why do you prepare this? An elder in the family has passed away?" Huang Song said, "It's not that the elder in the family has passed away. Lanting's grandmother has passed away. As a good friend of Lanting, I am naturally considered a junior of the old lady. According to my friendship with Lanting, the old lady has passed away. It is reasonable for me to be present to mourn." A trace of astonishment flashed in Lady Qi's eyes. At the same time, she felt a little helpless and amused. Huang Song and Jiang Pengji's personal friendship was really good, but both of them plotted against each other. Their friendship was too strange. That old lady is the grandmother of the Duke of Lanting. Judging from her age, it should be a joyous funeral. Lady Qi's mind raced, and she roughly knew what to prepare. She asked Huang Song hesitantly, "At this critical juncture, the old madam has passed away. Won't Lang Jun be passive?" Huang Song spread his hands and rolled his eyes, looking as if he had nothing left to live for. "The outside world is saying that I took Hejian County, imprisoned the Liu family, and scared old madam to death." Logically, it made sense, but Huang Song still felt that it was a scapegoat. If it wasn't for Lady Liu's quick decision, he would have pushed the blame onto his good friend, Jiang Pengji. Perhaps Jiang Pengji's decision to separate from the main family had angered the stubborn and old-fashioned old man to the point of having a stroke. Unfortunately, Huang Song had already been splashed with a basin of dirty water. If he didn't care and splashed it back, it would only make things worse. Rather than that, he might as well be more magnanimous and take the initiative to pay his respects as a junior. That way, he would be able to clear his name. No matter what, he had only indirectly angered the old madam to death. It was not intentional. Lady Qi raised her eyebrows and said angrily, "Are there really people out there who can't distinguish right from wrong?" Huang Song said, "They're just some ignorant people. This little bit of evil can't hurt me." Lady Qi felt uncomfortable. "In that case, you still want to pay your respects?" If it were her, she would have vomited to death. Lanting is in Wanshou. She definitely won't be able to make it on the 7th day of the first month. She won't be able to attend grandmother's funeral. I've been friends with her for a while, so I should help her. Taking 10,000 steps back, even if it's not for Lanting, I should still show my attitude. Dodging and evading will only make me feel guilty. Lady Qi's expression relaxed slightly. The Liu family's territory was covered with white banners. The morning hall was cold and solemn. Whether the clan members were sincere or not, they all had to show a sorrowful expression. The old madam's son, daughter-in-law, daughter, son-in-law, and all the grandchildren wore mourning clothes. The sound of sobbing and mourning drifted out of the door and walls. When Huang Song came to pay his respects, many people felt that he was really asking for a beating. However, the situation was stronger than he was. Now that Hejian County was in Huang Song's hands, no one dared to confront him head-on. In just a few days, Liu Zhai's gray hair had completely turned white, turning into a lifeless and lusterless silvery white. His entire body was also hunched, and his face had aged more than a year. When Huang Song arrived, Liu Zhai went forward to welcome him with the help of Liu Hong. He forced himself to cheer up and exchange greetings with Huang Song. Huang Song put on the attitude of a junior and knew when to advance and went to retreat. Instead, it made some of the Liu family members who did not know the truth angry, but had nowhere to vent their anger. He came to pay his respects today, not just to light a stick of incense. He also wrote an elegiac oration for the old madam. Of course, this elegiac oration was not written by him. He had asked Nie Sun to write it for him. His literary talent was definitely not inferior to that of a famous Confucian scholar. After the elegiac oration, many people were sad and moved. The old madam's daughter and daughter-in-law wept with tears in their eyes. They were so sad that they could not restrain themselves. With this, Huang Song fiercely made a good impression on them and washed away most of the blame he carried. No matter how evil others were, they could not say it out loud. Since Hejian County had fallen, Jiang Pengji had sent troops to the front line. When the news of the old madam's death reached her, Jiang Pengji was stunned for a moment. She had no impression of this cheap grandmother. She rummaged through Liu Shi's memory and barely found some scattered memories in the corner. According to Liu Shi's memory, this grandmother treated people extremely harshly and coldly. She also hated Liu Shi to the core. If there were not people around, she really wanted to reply that it was none of her business. She thought so in her heart, but her face showed a horrified and sorrowful expression. Her body swayed unsteadily. "My lord, my condolences, my lord." Jiang Pengji's acting was too exquisite. No one could see any flaws. No matter how they racked their brains, they could not think of a lord who could be so calm even after her grandmother died. Oh, wasn't that her grandmother? But others did not know about this. Jiang Pengji's blood drained. Her eyes were bloodshot and filled with tears. She raised her hand to grab Wei Si's hand and held it tightly. It seemed that she wanted to use it to draw strength that made him feel at ease. Her lips moved a little. Her eyes rolled back and she fainted. It was not that Jiang Pengji's acting skills were not good enough. It was just that she had no similar experience and was afraid that her acting would not be realistic. In her previous life, she did not even know who her biological parents were. When she was a few years old, she was sent by her adoptive parents to the Special Military Academy to be trained as a genetic warrior. Jiang Pengji's rationality was perfect, but there were still many gaps in her emotional side. She really could not do it if she was asked to vividly play a filial little girl who had lost her grandmother. With a sudden inspiration, Jiang Pengji used the great technique of pretending to be unconscious that had worked every time. Her fainting scared the hell out of people. Qiguan Rang took advantage of the chaos to secretly take Jiang Pengji's pulse. After confirming her pulse, he released his hand without a trace. Very good. It was not a slippery pulse. Although Qiguan Rang had been looking forward to seeing the young Lord's shadow, if the Lord was pregnant at this juncture, he would really be in trouble. It was fine as long as she was not pregnant. Jiang Pengji's heart was beating like a drum. Chapter 1253. Of course, Qiguan Rang did not realize that she was pretending to be unconscious. Not only him, but the others were also shocked. Not long after, the news that Jiang Pengji had suffered a huge blow from her grandmother's death and was bedridden spread, causing panic among the people. She was the leader and backbone of the entire force. Many people began to panic when she suddenly fell seriously ill and fell into a coma. After the military doctor's diagnosis, he said that Jiang Pengji was too grief-stricken, which triggered a chronic illness. If she was not young, she might not have woken up. For the sake of her health and life, it was not advisable to rush about or worry about things. She should rest and recuperate in peace for 3 to 5 months. 3 to 5 months? It would be too late by then. When the generals and soldiers heard about this, their hearts felt cold. Their lord fell ill, and the morale of the army was disrupted before victory was achieved. This was not a good sign. For a moment, the camp was filled with a depressing atmosphere. They were worried about Jiang Pengji's situation. At this time, a few generals stood up to reorganize the camp. Fu Wang took over the military power and encouraged the generals. The overall morale did not drop, but rose. Their lord fell ill. They needed to pull themselves together and defend the land so that the enemy would not dare to invade. The morale of the army outside has stabilized. Jiang Pengji, who was rumored to be seriously ill and unconscious, was leaning on the table. She was in high spirits and had a ruddy complexion. She did not look like a sick person at all. Fu Wang said solemnly, "It has stabilized. The morale of the troops is high, and they are training harder than before." Jiang Pengji nodded. Her thoughts could not help but return to that day. Everyone thought that she was really ill, and they were all very anxious. However, they were smart people. After a while, they realized that something was wrong. Their lord was as strong as a wild bear. Even if she was really grief-stricken, she would not faint so easily, right? Finally, they dismissed the idlers around them and waited for Jiang Pengji to wake up. Jiang Pengji lay on the sickbed and quietly opened one eye. She realized that her trusted subordinates were all there, staring at her with unkind expressions. She had overturned the car. The scene of the car accident was extremely tragic. Coupled with the merciless mockery of the salted fish in the streaming room, the situation was extremely chaotic. Tai Jiashi, streamer, have you heard of the story of the boy who cried wolf? Lei Dianfuang, trash streamer, what a waste of my feelings. My worries just now have all been fed to the dogs. Blackblade Master, I didn't expect you to be such a streamer. When did you become so good at pretending to be unconscious? Yizhong Man, shocking. A famous streamer has been fooled on the spot. Many innocent boys have been fooled, but they are still infatuated. Jiang Pengji's skin was thick and strong. It was impervious to swords and spears. She stood up with a smile. You haven't left yet? Everyone, Wei Ci said helplessly. What is my lord doing? Jiang Pengji choked in her heart. How could she tell him the real reason? She had a brainwave and a plan came to her mind. She said with an indifferent expression, Grandmother passed away. As her granddaughter, I must attend her funeral, but Hejin County is already Bogeo's territory. If I really go to the funeral, I don't know if it's for my grandmother or myself. Bogeo won't let go of this opportunity. Qiguan Rang had a look of disapproval on his face. His thin lips were pursed into a straight line. The Lord used the trick of pretending to be unconscious to avoid attending the funeral. This inevitably left the outside world with the impression that she was unfilial and afraid of Huang Song. This matter is not difficult to resolve. My lord can send someone to attend the funeral on your behalf. Although the person can't be there personally, it's the same if his heart is there. Their lord had always been as shrewd as a fox. How could she be muddle-headed and use such a stupid trick? I know this, but Bogeo took Hejin County and scared my grandmother to death. We can't just let this go. Jiang Pengji's eyes flashed with a scheming and cold light. She smiled and said, what if the news spreads that I'm too grief-stricken and have a chronic illness that makes it difficult for me to travel? Bogeo's side will definitely be suspicious. Once the news is confirmed to be true, they will let down their guard. The army can take this opportunity to move their troops around and launch a surprise attack. Everyone was stunned. They didn't expect Jiang Pengji to pretend to be unconscious to be her strategy. Jiang Pengji continued, Hejin County has always been a battleground for military strategists. Bogeo has the advantage of the right time and the right place to station his troops here. He has Haozhou and Qinzhou. He can take advantage of the terrain and divide his troops to attack Wanzhou and Songzhou. We can only respond passively. In addition, Bogeo and I formed an alliance to attack the Meng family in Songzhou. He crossed the river from the lower reaches of the Song River to attack Songzhou. He's already familiar with the route. Although Huang Song only had 2 prefectures, his position was a pain in the ass for Jiang Pengji. Huang Song had taken over Hejin County, so Wanzhou had become a close target for him to attack. Jiang Pengji had been operating in Wanzhou for so many years. How could she bear to use Wanzhou as the main battlefield for the confrontation between the 2 armies? Even if they won the war, Wanzhou would be destroyed. It would really be like the saying, after being busy for a few years, everything would be back to square one. She was now afraid to take action, but Huang Song had nothing to fear. In order to protect Wanzhou, Jiang Pengji had to move her troops first and further push the battlefront to Huang Song's territory. After listening to her, everyone revealed a thoughtful expression. What their lord had said was what they had been most worried about recently. Wanzhou must not be lost. They didn't expect their lord to be so meticulous and take the risk to make this plan happen. Salted fish in the livestream room listened in a daze. Tudu Fei Qiu. I really believe the streamer's words. Lao Ciji Lianmeng. I've been stuck with a year's worth of instant noodles. The streamer definitely came up with this at the last minute to smooth things over. In Yuejiviga Chinmo. Haha. The streamer is really an elite and outstanding talent who lies with her eyes wide open. I'd be blind to believe her words. They've been following the livestream room for so many years. They knew what kind of person Jiang Pengji was, all right? Unfortunately, no one else could see their complaints except Jiang Pengji. Yang Si found a military doctor to diagnose Jiang Pengji. In the end, he concluded that she had been grieving too much and had triggered an old illness. She could only rest quietly and not tire herself out. It was worth mentioning that the military doctor was none other than Dian Yan's wife. Dian Yan, Meng Han, and Feng Jin were transferred to Tsang Prefecture by Jiang Pengji to prevent Huang Song from attacking Tsang Prefecture from Songhe Gorge and Jiangdu. Hanyu, Xieze, and Qinggong were transferred to Zhe County and Hu County by her. They were on guard and cooperated with the main force to encircle and suppress Huang Song's forces. The main force was led by Jiang Pengji. Wei Ci, Yang Si, and Qiguan Rang were the strategists. Fu Wang was the commander-in-chief. Li Yun and Jiang Nongqin were the deputies. They were to directly restrain Huang Song's troops. Sun Wen guarded the northern borderline to prevent the herdsmen of the northern borderline from rebelling during the chaos. Su Ku and Feng Zhen defended Wanzhou and Chongzhou. Bai Ning led the troops to guard the rear for the first time. Chung Yuan was transferred to Hu County. The troops seemed to be scattered, but in fact, they were all targeting Huang Song. After discussing a comprehensive plan, Jiang Pengji continued to be her patient. She was only responsible for pretending to be sick every day. Wei Ci took on the responsibility of representing Jiang Pengji to attend the funeral. He rushed to Hejian County overnight. Qiguan Rang expressed that he was up to the task. Wei Ci was not from Hejian County. He was not very familiar with the roads. Qiguan Rang was different. He was half a son-in-law of Hejian and had stayed there for several years. Jiang Pengji glanced at him with a faint smile. Her gaze immediately fell on Wei Ci. Qiguan Rang was silent. How could he forget again? Wei Ci was someone his lord had set her eyes on. Attending the funeral on her behalf this time was a disguised acknowledgement of Wei Ci's identity. TSK, the sour smell of love, was everywhere. Chapter 1254. Father, I'm guarding the morning hall. You should go and rest for a while. Lu Heng whispered to Lu Zhai. His expression was full of exhaustion, and the green in his eyes deepened. When it rains, it pours, it pours. The ship is late, and the wind hits the head. This year, Madame Lu seemed to have offended the Tai Sui, with everything going her way. First, the Zhang family of Hejian and Huang Song colluded and betrayed Hejian County, causing the entire Lu family to be put under house arrest. Then, the old lord died of anger. His father also fainted in the morning hall because of excessive grief. Despite his illness, he managed to hold the funeral. Lu Heng watched his father age more than 10 years in a few days. The leisurely and elegant life was replaced by depression and illness. Lu Zhai was sick, very sick. When he coughed just now, he vomited a mouthful of sputum with blood. Lu Heng was frightened by the situation. He was afraid that his father would be too tired and die with his grandmother, so he tried to persuade him to rest. However, Lu Zhai was stubborn. Not only did he not want to rest, but he also paid more attention to the old lord's funeral. He asked about everything. It's okay. Father, your health is more important. If grandmother is watching from heaven, she will feel sorry for you. Lu Heng said all kinds of good things, but Lu Zhai still couldn't move him. Burn more ghost money for your grandmother. Lu Zhai couldn't help but cough after saying 2 sentences. Her obscure eyes were dim and lifeless. In addition, increase the amount of money you donate to the temple by 20%. You must make the master of the temple work harder and recite more scriptures every day. There were many temples near Hejian County. Most of the local gentry believed in Buddhism. When the old lord passed away, the most famous master in the area was invited to recite scriptures and perform rituals for the deceased for 49 days. After working hard, Lu Zhai's condition worsened. In just a few days, he was tortured until he was thin. Seeing this situation, Lu Heng's eyes became moist. He didn't expect his father to have such deep feelings for his grandmother and to be so dedicated to her funeral. She was gone, and the dead were the most important. As a junior, Lu Heng couldn't complain about the excessive things his grandmother had done. "Let everything go," he said. "Your son understands. I will definitely remember to donate 20% more of the money for the sesame oil." According to the customs of the day, the time to stop the coffin was different depending on the financial situation of each family. For example, the time to stop the coffin was 1 day 7, 3 days 7, 5 days 7, or 7 days 7. For an ordinary family, the funeral could be held after 7 days. For a wealthy family, it was a little longer. For those with status and prestige, the funeral would be held for 49 days. The old lord's position in the Lu family was not low. Naturally, the number of days when the spirit stopped was based on Muqiqi. After the funeral was over, it was followed by a grand burial. The coffin was placed in the grave of Lu Zheng's biological father. The 49 long days didn't just torture the old lord's corpse. It also tortured the filial sons and grandsons who were guarding the coffin. Lu Zhang's body suffered even more with his illness. Just after the 7th day of the old Fengjuan's death, he fell ill and could not take care of the mourning hall. Hearing this news, Huang Song said in surprise, "Lu Zhang is also sick? Really?" Keeping vigil at the coffin was hard work. The seasons were changing and many of the Lu family members had fallen ill. There were not enough doctors in the manor, so they could only hire people from outside the manor. Huang Song took this opportunity to plant a few spies. The doctor who was treating Lu Zhang was one of Huang Song's people. The doctor did not dare to hide anything and hurriedly raised his hand to report to Huang Song. "It's absolutely true. His body is severely damaged. He is weak both inside and out. Moreover, he is overly worried and depressed. If he does not rest and treat himself, I'm afraid he won't be able to last until the day the old madam is buried." Huang Song's eyes widened in shock. He blurted out, "It's that serious?" The doctor said, "It's serious, not light. The Lu family has offended the Tai Sui this year. The old madam just passed away, and the eldest son is on his last breath. Are they going to hold a funeral?" Huang Song did not care if Lu Zheng died or not. He only cared that if Lu Zheng died, he would have to take the blame. "Go back and treat him well. Use whatever medicine is useful. Don't be stingy. Even if you use strong medicine, you have to keep him alive. Don't let him die." Huang Song did not want to recite 2 funeral rites in a month. It was too unlucky. If Lu Zheng died and he was blamed, wouldn't he feel wronged? Hearing Huang Song's instructions, the doctor did not dare to let his guard down. He carefully attended to Lu Zheng. After a few days, Huang Song received news from the scouts in front. Jiang Pengji had sent messengers to attend the funeral. "Who did Lanting send?" Cheng Jing replied, "Wei Ci, Wei Zi Xiao." Huang Song said, "Wei Ci? I remember that he is from the same sect as Yumo. It seems that Lanting values him very much." After all, he was representing himself to attend the funeral of an elder. Those who were not his confidants did not have the right to do so. Cheng Jing said, "Zi Xiao's ability is like the moon. Although it is not as dazzling as the sun, it has its own brilliance. It is normal that he is valued by the Lanting Duke. After all, they were brothers from the same sect. It was basic for them to boast about each other in business. Of course, this was not a brainless boast. Wei Ci's administrative ability was strong, but he was low-key and never competitive. This caused his presence to be low. 2 days passed in the blink of an eye. Wei Ci arrived at Hejian County, travel-worn. Under the shadow of war, Hejian County became increasingly desolate and cold. The nearby fields were overgrown with weeds, and there were no farmers farming for a long time. Although Huang Song did not use strong troops to conquer Hejian County, there were still many people who hurriedly fled with their families. After entering the city, there was no one on either side of the street. The taverns and tea houses were closed. The steps were covered with moss and thick dust. Wei Xi was the messenger sent by Jiang Pengji. Naturally, Huang Song would not allow him to come and go as he pleased in his territory. There were many interrogations and tests. No matter how many tricks he used, Wei Xi dealt with them flawlessly. Because of Jiang Pengji, the Liu family was isolated by the gentry in Hejian. It was very cold near the old house. One could faintly hear the sound of weeping spirits. When the old lord passed away, many gentry families did not come to offer their condolences in order to disassociate themselves. They all closed their doors and refused to receive guests, such as the Shangwan family. Even during the most difficult times, he had never seen such a cold and desolate appearance. Of course, there were those who were afraid and those who were not. Qiguan Rang's father-in-law, Wei Yuan, dared to come to offer his condolences with great fanfare. Wei Xi rushed over. Lu Heng, who was in the morning hall, heard the news and hurriedly asked his servants to receive Wei Xi. At the same time, Lu Heng told his father, Lu Zheng. Lu Zheng had been bedridden for a few days. His condition had improved, and he had regained consciousness. When he heard that Jiang Pengji had sent someone to attend the funeral, he was stunned for a long time. His expression was very complicated. Lu Heng was puzzled. Since his father had been seriously ill, he often showed such an expression that he could not understand. It's rare that she has such thoughts. Heng, receive the messenger well. Don't be cold. Chapter 1255. Receiving the news that Wei Xi had come to attend the funeral on behalf of Jiang Pengji, the Lus had mixed feelings. They knew that Jiang Pengji's independence not only slapped the Lus in the face, but also made them the laughingstock of the world. They wished they could straighten their backs and kick her messenger out. At the same time, they were secretly happy that she had not forgotten her clan and knew to send people to attend her grandmother's funeral. Just as Lu Zheng had said, they were meat on the chopping block. The law of survival in troubled times was one's fist. Only those with a strong fist had the confidence to speak. Without a strong backing, whether it was the gentry or the feudal lords, sooner or later, they would be fat fishes on the chopping block waiting to be slaughtered. The people of the Liu clan had seen too many things happening in the past few days. The once lively clan was now deserted. The huge contrast made many people feel uncomfortable. Because of this, they also deeply realized the importance of power and fists. They obviously hated Wei Xi, but they still had to put on a smile to deal with him, for fear of angering him. Wei Xi did not care about these people with different thoughts. After seeing Lu Heng, he earnestly offered incense to the old lord. Lu Heng did not know Wei Xi and did not know his temperament. He could only pick a topic carefully and secretly test Jiang Pengji's attitude. Wei Xi frowned slightly and looked worried. He told the truth. My master was very sad when she heard of the old lord's death. She was greatly shocked and accidentally triggered her old illness. She is still sick and can't get up. It's not that she doesn't want to come personally to attend the funeral. It's just that she is powerless. What? His cousin is sick? Lu Heng questioned subconsciously. When he realized that revealing his emotions would make Wei Xi unhappy, he quickly tried to salvage the situation. The Lord of Lanting has always been healthy. How'd he trigger his old illness and fall ill? Wei Xi did not seem to see Lu Heng's inadvertent doubts and said worriedly, My master is stubborn and likes to do everything herself. In the previous battles, my master had taken the lead. Although her life was not in danger, minor injuries and illnesses were unavoidable. She also refused to rest, and as a result, a hidden danger has been buried in her body. Before I left, my master was still in a coma. The doctor said that she would need at least 3 days to wake up. Jiang Pengji was a drama queen, and Wei Xi was not inferior to her. When he talked about this, the scene of the emperor's serious illness in his previous life appeared in his mind. His expression was especially solemn and worried. Lu Heng's heart skipped a beat, immediately believing most of it. He asked, Is there anything wrong with your health, Lord Lanting? I hope it's not serious. Wei Si sighed and said, "The doctor advised that it's not advisable to rush about or worry too much. It's better to recuperate in peace for 3 to 5 months." 3 to 5 months? Lu Heng felt a chill in his heart. 3 to 5 months of recuperation was already a very serious illness. The two of them stood at the side and talked. Their voices were not loud, but the morning hall was a quiet place. Although there were filial sons and grandsons who cried loudly, the mourning did not happen 24 hours a day. Usually there were several shifts, and there was a break in between. Therefore, their conversation was overheard by those who were observant. The clansmen of the Lu clan sat on the praying mats and silently recited scriptures. At the same time, they strained their ears in an attempt to hear more news. After hearing this, all of them trembled in fear. Lu Shi had fallen ill? He seemed to be seriously ill? It must be a lie. On second thought, she would have to be crazy to pretend to be sick to avoid attending the funeral. Wasn't she afraid that people would criticize her? Wei Si asked, "Why didn't I see Master Lu just now?" The Lu clan was still Lu Zhang's housekeeper, so Wei Si used seniority to call him Master Lu. If it was Lu Heng who was in charge, the way he addressed him would be different. At the mention of his father, Lu Zhang's expression became gloomy. He said, "Father has been working hard for grandmother's funeral. He fell ill a few days ago and can only be sustained with medicine." Wei Si sighed and said, "These are troubled times. After this period of time, there will be joy after extreme misfortune." Lu Heng nodded and hoped that Wei Si's blessing would come true. Wei Si came on behalf of Jiang Pengji. Not only did he light incense, but he also had to do whatever Jiang Pengji wanted to do. Lu Heng was extremely grateful to him. Although Wei Si's appearance made him look unreliable, he was actually very capable. With his help, Lu Heng felt the burden on his shoulders lighten. He could finally take a breather. At the same time, the spies in hiding passed the news to Huang Song. Like Lu Heng, Huang Song chose to doubt it. Jiang Pengji left a deep impression on him. She was stronger and more energetic than a wild bear. How could she fall ill so easily? It felt like a mountain that had stood for thousands of years suddenly collapsed. Outsiders naturally could not accept it. Not long after, a secret letter was passed to him. The person who delivered the secret letter arrived at Hejian County right after Wei Si. The contents of the secret letter were also sent by a spy planted in Jiang Pengji's army. When he opened it, Huang Song's expression suddenly became complicated. Lanting really fell ill? So seriously ill? According to the spy's information, after Jiang Pengji fell seriously ill, the military camp was in turmoil for a while. The furnaces in the logistics department did not stop boiling medicine. Different famous doctors were often invited to treat Jiang Pengji. The spy was meticulous and suspicious. He could not get in touch with Jiang Pengji, but he thought of ways to take away some of the medicine dregs. He also secretly sent people to contact the relatives of the doctors who had treated Jiang Pengji. Not every doctor would keep their mouth shut about a patient's condition. Moreover, it was related to the situation of the entire world. According to the collected information, these doctors had indeed encountered a difficult problem. They were constantly worried and frowning all day long. Of course, it was not that these doctors had good acting skills. It was just that the patient they had diagnosed was indeed a terminally ill woman. Jiang Pengji was cautious by nature. If she wanted to put on an act, she would go all the way. She would not let go of any details. The quality of the spy sent by Huang Song was very high. However, as the devil grew stronger, the justice grew stronger. Who would not fall for her? "Someone, check what these medicine dregs are used for." Huang Song's heart wavered, but his suspicious character made him not completely believe it. He divided the medicine dregs into several small portions and secretly asked several different doctors to examine them. Everyone's diagnosis was similar. After learning about the situation, Huang Song sat in a daze for a long time, from afternoon to night. Not to mention him, anyone else would have reacted the same way. Jiang Pengji was like a mountain pressing down on Huang Song. For many years, she had made him feel pressured. He had no choice but to work hard and be cautious. They were about to raise their swords and fight each other to the death. The mountain that had been pressing down on him and suffocating him was actually going to collapse? She was kidding. Seeing him like this, Lady Qi could not help but ask with concern, "Lang Jun, what happened?" Huang Song took a deep breath and revealed an expression that he did not know how to describe. "Madam, Lanting seems to be very ill." Madame Qi secretly rolled her eyes. "You actually believe that?" Huang Song nodded. "I believe it." Lady Qi knew how suspicious her husband was. If he believed something, it was definitely not far from the truth. What's going on?" Lady Qi looked surprised and said, "Lang Jun, why don't you invite these gentlemen to the house for a chat?" Huang Song slapped his forehead. Chapter 1256. Lu Shi was seriously ill? How is that possible? When Feng Zhu and the others heard the news, their first reaction was disbelief. Especially Cheng Jing, who had the privilege of watching Jiang Pengji kill demons up close. He knew that Jiang Pengji was afraid of demons and ghosts. He did not believe that her grandmother's death could affect her to this extent. However, facts spoke louder than words, and the evidence was irrefutable. In terms of skepticism, they were far inferior to Huang Song. Even Huang Song was convinced by the collected evidence. How could they doubt the truth? Suspicion required evidence. They could not find any evidence or flaws to overturn the fact that Lu Shi was seriously ill. Could it be that they could only rely on intuition or irresponsible guesses like, "I think"? "My lord, you mean to seize this opportunity?" Jiang Pengji was seriously ill, and there was no leader in the camp. No matter how capable the strategists and generals were, they could not overstep their authority in many matters. Losing their lord meant that they had no backbone. They would be overcautious in both offense and defense. This was a good opportunity for Huang Song and the others to take advantage of the situation. Huang Song nodded. "There's only one chance. We don't know when Lanting's condition will improve or worsen." Jiang Pengji was still single. If she knelt down, the power she had built up would inevitably collapse. Huang Song could not help but sigh at the thought of that situation. As an opponent, the more unlucky the enemy, the better, but as a friend, he hoped that she would be well. Of course, before the outcome of the battle was decided, the relationship between him and Jiang Pengji was only hostile. Cheng Jing said, "I'm afraid it's not appropriate to send troops rashly. It's better to test the waters by deploying troops." Feng Zhu glanced at Cheng Jing in surprise. It was the first time he was so cautious. Yumo is right. Lu Shi has always been treacherous and cunning. Even if there is irrefutable evidence, we should be more cautious. Huang Song was a little hesitant, but Cheng Jing and Feng Zhu's words made sense. They should test the waters first. If there was a trap, they would not lose everything. If possible, keep a close eye on Zixiao. Cheng Jing thought for a moment, then added, "Since he is the messenger sent by Duke Lanting, he should know very well whether Duke Lanting is really sick or not, and whether his illness is serious. He can act for a while, but he can't act all the time." No matter how much information was obtained from the front line, as long as Wei Ci revealed a flaw, the truth would be clear at a glance. Huang Song agreed and nodded his head. Cheng Jing said, "If the Duke of Lanting is seriously ill, my lord will be able to sit back and relax." Wei Ci did not know that Cheng Jing had set a trap for him, a fellow disciple, but he also knew that there were countless eyes lurking around him. In his previous life, he was able to control his emotions and ambitions, and his mentality had long been tempered. In an unfamiliar environment, he needed to be even more cautious. As the Lord's trusted aide, how should he react when the Lord was seriously ill and in a coma? Wei Ci was very clear about this because he had the template from his previous life. His mind kept replaying the scenes of the Emperor's serious illness and the constant treachery of the court in his previous life. It was only natural for him to show worry and worry. Although it wasn't to the extent that he didn't care about his appearance, he looked very dispirited and depressed. According to his habits from his previous life, he copied the scriptures for Jiang Pengji's prayers. He would forget himself as soon as he copied. Every day at 2 o'clock, he would go to the morning hall to keep vigil for the old lord for a while, Then he would return to his bedroom to wash up and copy the scripture for his lord to pray for blessings. He did not know how many pairs of eyes were watching him in the dark, and when they would be watching him, what he had to do was to put on a good show. After a few days, an unexpected visitor came to the door. Master Liaochen? This person was none other than the old monk who had given him the phoenix fate that he had met by chance in the past. Master Liaochen was a monk hired by the Lus to perform religious rites for the old lord at a high price. The alarm bells in Wei Si's heart rang loudly, and he quickly tensed up. Donor Wei, is it convenient for me to enter the house now? Master Liaochen looked at Wei Si with a smile. Seeing that the vital energy around Wei Si had not dissipated, his smile deepened. Wei Si moved aside to let Master Liaochen in. At the same time, his heart was beating like a drum. He did not know the purpose of Liaochen's visit. Wei Si knew very well that Master Liaochen and Jinren Liru were both otherworldly masters. They could see many unscientific things. Others did not know about Jiang Pingji's situation, but these old fakes always had their ways to know. After so many years, Donor Wei's complexion is much better. Wei Si said, "Thanks to you, I've been taking good care of myself these past few years. My body is much healthier than before." Master Liaochen looked at the scroll on the table. It was filled with neat and elegant words, just like Wei Si. Wei Si saw that Master Liaochen was looking at the scriptures he had copied. His ears turned red, and his gaze became uneasy. "Master Liaochen, are you here to reminisce about the old days?" Master Liaochen shook his head. "No, I am here because I have something to discuss with Donor Wei." Wei Si said, "Master, please speak." Master Liaochen said, "Donor Wei, do you remember the demon that was mentioned before?" Wei Si replied humbly, "Of course I remember, but I have not been able to find any traces of it all these years. I'm very worried. Do you have any clues here?" Master Liaochen shook his head regretfully. "I don't have any clues, but an old friend asked me to pass something to you." Then, Master Liaochen took out a jade seal and placed it in front of Wei Si. The jade seal was unique and exquisite. It was 7 inches thick and 2.5 inches long. It was as white as snow and had a transparent texture. There was an inexplicable coolness to the touch that made one feel refreshed. When he saw the jade seal, Wei Si's eyes widened. He straightened his body and leaned forward to pick up the jade seal. Isn't this the seal that Jinren Liru uses to invite the gods to come to the altar? Almost every Taoist priest would use a Taoist seal during religious ceremonies and ceremonies. This was an important tool for them to eat, and it was used for stamping when they were handing out the forms. It was said that only the sealed documents could be received by the gods, and they could command the ghosts and gods to do their bidding. Jinren Liru was considered half his teacher. Wei Si's current skills as a charlatan were taught by him. How could Wei Si not be familiar with the seal he used? Master Liaochen said, "A few years ago, this person fled to Hejian in a hurry. He attacked the mountain gate without any explanation and left this behind." "A few years ago?" Wei Si was shocked and asked, "About when?" Master Liaochen gave an approximate time. Wei Si's heart skipped a beat. Jinren Liru fled to Hejian not long after they met. Jinren. Although there was no evidence, Wei Si felt that the trouble he encountered must have something to do with him. Master Liaochen smiled. "That person is fine. His life should not be in danger. Donor Wei, don't worry." Wei Si let out a sigh of relief. He looked down at the exquisite seal in his hand, not knowing what Jinren Liru was hinting at. Master Liaochen said, "In Taoism, the seal is mostly used to invite the gods to come to the altar. This jade seal has followed many masters and has long developed spirituality. Not only can it be used to invite the gods, but it can also suppress evil spirits. The Jinren left this to you for the latter." Wei Si was not a Taoist, and he had no occasion to use the seal. After thinking about it, the only possibility left was suppressing evil spirits. "I know a little about divination, but I don't know how to subdue demons or where the evil spirits are. Jinren gave this to me. What a waste." Chapter 12:57. Jiang Pengji was the first to know that there was a jade seal by Wei Si's side. She came to his side through the yin-yang jade pendant and looked at his sleeping face greedily. She could not get enough of it. How could her Zixiao be so good-looking? Just as she was about to touch his face, her fingertips seemed to have been electrocuted, causing her to subconsciously withdraw her hand. Jiang Pengji shifted her gaze to the jade seal hanging on Wei Si's waist. She stared at it for a while. The jade seal was obviously for a man. Jiang Pengji was not worried that it was given to Wei Si by a prostitute. Although she did not know what a Taoist seal was, it gave her a sense of righteousness. It should not be an evil thing. The only thing that made her a pain in the ass was that she could not take advantage of him to her heart's content. Tisk, who's so nosy, Jiang Pengji stared at the jade seal with a bitter and vengeful look. She stared at it for a while, but could not see anything. Even though she was experienced and knowledgeable, Jiang Pengji did not know what it was. She only knew that it was good for Wei Si. For that reason, she would not dismantle it violently. Before leaving, Jiang Pengji looked at Wei Si deeply and sighed faintly. She went back to plant mushrooms. She felt that she had a bad mouth. Of all the things she could say, she had to pretend to be sick. As a patient, she could not go anywhere other than her own tent. Her only pleasure was to wander to Wei Si's side to relieve her longing. She felt that she had nowhere to vent her energy. When she was bored, she could only chat with the idle audience. At that moment, she felt that the idle audience was so cute. Otherwise, she would be so bored that she would go crazy. Although the undercurrent was surging and war was about to break out, the old lord's body had stopped for 49 days. It was time to hold a funeral. Before the funeral, the filial sons and grandsons could see the old lord one last time. Wei Si replaced Jiang Pengji's position, so naturally he could see the old lady one last time. Although the body had stopped for 49 days, a lot of things were used to preserve the body every day. Therefore, the old lord's body had not rotted after such a long time. When the family buried the body, they applied some powder on the old lord's face. His complexion looked rosy and lifelike. If it weren't for the stench of a corpse lingering in the air and the fact that they could feel the coldness from the coffin, they would have thought that the old Feng Jun was still alive. Wei Si glanced at the old lord's corpse. At first glance, there was nothing, but at second glance, he felt that something was amiss. It was rumored that the old lord died from anger, but Wei Si had asked Lu Hong about the real cause of death. Because thick phlegm was stuck in his throat, he died because he could not breathe properly. This way of dying was quite special. It was very painful for an old man. On the day of the old lord's burial, Lu Jue, who was seriously ill, forced himself to come and send him off. No one could dissuade him and could only support him as he walked. After opening Lu Zhai's father's grave and going through a series of rituals, the old Feng Juan's coffin needed to be buried inside. After the tomb was sealed, Lu Zhan cried bitterly and finally fainted. Everyone was in a flurry again. Lu Zhai's life was saved, but the condition of his body was worrying. The doctor also said that even if he recuperated well, he only had a few years left to live. Wei Si left after taking a look at Lu Zhai. He chose a remote path to return to the house and inadvertently heard a few words. The old lord was arrogant when she was alive and liked to be extravagant. The maids who serve her also liked to use her power to bully others and secretly take advantage of her. Once she died, the monkeys would scatter when the tree falls. These maids lost their support and were now living a difficult life. If they were not sent out of the mansion, they would be transferred to a remote courtyard to work. Thinking back to the beautiful days, they were sad and reminiscing about the old lord's good side. One of them had cleaned up the old lord's remains. She said in a sympathetic tone, "There is still a big pool of green phlegm at the side of the old lord's mouth. She usually liked to be clean, but I didn't expect her to die in such an undignified way. It doesn't matter if she is rich or poor. In the end, she can't escape death. Without the old lord's protection, we don't know where we can live in the future." The Langju in the guest courtyard was so beautiful. If he was willing to accept you and me, wouldn't we have a place to live? When Wei Si heard the first sentence, he frowned. When he heard the words, Lang Jun in the guest courtyard, he became sullen. There was still a big pool of green phlegm at the side of the old lord's mouth back in the bedroom. The maid's voice echoed in Wei Si's mind. A thought flashed in his mind, and he suddenly understood something. Could it be? A terrible thought appeared in Wei Si's mind. The old lord was buried, and Wei Si's task was completed. The next day, he submitted his resignation to Lu Hong. Lu Hong said, "I heard that Huang Song has been making a lot of moves recently. Can Lanting still handle it?" Wei Si sighed. There are many talents under the Lord's command. Even if the Lord is seriously ill and can't take charge of the overall situation, it won't be a problem to hold on for a while. Lu Hong comforted him. Lanting's martial arts are prosperous and will definitely be able to turn danger into safety. Wei Si smiled weakly, but he quickly calmed down. Lu Hong watched Wei Si leave, his eyes filled with worry that could not be dispersed. If Lu Shi really couldn't defeat Huang Song, what should the Lu family do? Should he find another way out for the Lu family? Before and after the old lord's burial, there were fierce confrontations on several battlefields. According to Huang Song's plan, he intended to place the main battlefield in Wanzhou and Hu County and pretend to attack Songzhou to attract Jiang Pengji's main forces. Jiang Pengji's cavalry had an obvious advantage. If they mainly attacked Songzhou, the enemy would have the terrain advantage and they would suffer a great loss. A feint attack should look like one. Huang Song mobilized his troops and sent people ashore from Gorge River between Qinzhou and Songzhou. When he and Jiang Pengji formed an alliance to attack the Meng family in Songzhou, he went ashore from Gorge River and directly attacked Songzhou. Jiang Pengji ordered Dian Yin, Meng Hun, and Feng Jin to guard Songzhou and keep an eye on the situation around Gorge River. Dian Yin asked, "Military counselor, according to the scouts, the enemy is ready to go ashore. Should we send troops to stop them now?" Gorge River was located in the middle and lower reaches of the Song River in Songzhou. The river was wide and the water was gentle. It was very suitable for people to go ashore. Feng Jin said, "There's no hurry. Let them in." Feng Jin had also received news that Jiang Pengji was pretending to be sick, so he was not in a hurry to stop Huang Song's troops at Gorge River. Since they were going to act, they naturally had to act realistically. This time, the battle line was too long. Feng Jin's side was not assigned many troops. If they confronted the enemy on the other side of Gorge River, it would be easy to be seen through. It was better to follow the plan. First, let the enemy drive straight in. Then, when they were full of ambition, they would reveal their killer move. Because Feng Jin had already sent people to send the people nearby away, letting the enemy in would not cause too many losses. Dian Yin asked, "The enemy has a large number of troops. Letting them go ashore? I'm afraid it's not appropriate." Feng Jin shook his head. To Huang Song, Songzhou is not as important as Wanzhou or Hu County. Hu County has a lot of land. If we can take it, we won't have to worry about winter food after the autumn harvest. Wanzhou is where the Lord's foundation is. Any loss will shake the morale of the army. In comparison, although Songzhou has horses, it takes time to build up the cavalry. War horses can't be used as soon as they are brought in. The benefits won't be great in a short period of time. Meng Hun said, "Military counselor, do you mean that the number of troops attacking Songzhou is not as large as it seems?" Feng Jin laughed. "I'm afraid it's a trick to fool people. If they're really frightened, we will be the first to be exposed." After all, Feng Jin did not have many troops on his side. Chapter 1258. The Song River meandered from north to south, flowed through the gorge, and finally merged into the sea. The source of the river was turbulent and steep, densely covered with reefs. As it passed through the middle and lower reaches, the water became gentle and the river became wider. There were many ferries and ships, and it was adjacent to Haozhou and Qinzhou. It was the best springboard for Huang Song to attack Songzhou. However, as Feng Jin had analyzed, Songzhou was of little value to Huang Song. It was tasteless, but it would be a pity to abandon it. Its only purpose was to attract and mislead Jiang Pengji's firepower. It seemed to be a direct attack on Songzhou, but it was actually intended for Wanzhou and Hu County. If Jiang Pengji's main force could be lured to Cangzhou, then Huang Song's real main force could take the opportunity to attack the hinterland of Jiang Pengji's power. Everyone knew this, but war was about what was real and what was fake. Not only did it depend on logistics and financial resources, but it also depended on psychology to see who could be deceived. Feng Jin was a clear-headed and rational person. Naturally, he would not be fooled so easily. Dian Yin, dressed in armor, rushed into the main tent. Meng Hun and Feng Jin were discussing something with their heads lowered. There was a huge sand table in front of them. The current sand table was the simplest, but after their lord's improvements, it became three-dimensional and exquisite. The terrain of the mountains and rivers could be seen at a glance. The sand table in front of Meng Hun and Feng Jin took 2 to 3 months to collect and make. Just by looking at the sand table, Feng Jin could simulate the enemy's further marching routes and movements in his mind. Dian Yin barged in without permission. His expression was gloomy. Feng Jin put down the deduction model. Is there any progress at the front? Dian Yin walked too hastily. The armor he wore was so heavy that he was panting heavily when he spoke. He said, "Military counselor, things are not good." The scouts at the front reported that the enemy crossed the river for 4 consecutive days. There are 20,000 troops and horses, a total of 80,000. Didn't they say that Cangzhou was just a feint by Huang Song? Why did he send 80,000 troops and horses? Even if more than 50% of the 80,000 troops were Marines, there would still be 40,000 elites left. 40,000 elites was not a lot, but they did not have that many troops stationed in Cangzhou. They might not be able to resist. After hearing this, Feng Jin's eyes flashed with surprise. According to his understanding of the entire occupation, it was impossible for Huang Song to send so many troops to Cangzhou. He had only occupied 2 prefectures and did not have a lot of troops. Just by dividing his troops, he already had as many as 80,000. Was he planning to bet on Cangzhou? Feng Jin frowned, and Meng Hun, who was beside him, also revealed a solemn expression. Dian Yin said in a panic, "Military advisor, what should we do now? Jiang Pengji only sent 30,000 elite troops to Cangzhou." Feng Jin calculated the provisions, and with her consent, he recruited another 20,000 water soldiers locally. The total number was 50,000. Huang Song had suddenly dispatched 80,000 soldiers, and the pressure on Feng Jin's side had suddenly increased. Meng Hun suggested, "Why don't we write a letter to the Lord and ask for more troops?" Feng Jin flatly refused. "We can't. If we send more troops to Cangzhou, Wanzhou, and Hu County will be in danger. In order to save on food, material resources, and financial resources, his lord had always taken the route of elite soldiers. This time, Jiang Pengji had only agreed to the recruitment of water soldiers, after Feng Jin had persuaded her in every possible way. If they asked for reinforcements, the forces defending Wanzhou and Hu County would be weak. That would be courting death. Feng Jin said, "Even if we lose Cangzhou, nothing must happen to Wanzhou and Hu County." When Meng Hun and Dian Yin saw this, they immediately shut their mouths tightly and no longer spoke. They both knew that Feng Jin was right. If Hu County was lost, it would be equivalent to giving Huang Song a prefecture's grain depot for nothing. It would allow him to continue fighting in the winter. If Wanzhou was lost, it would be equivalent to the enemy stabbing the heart of his own forces. The territory would be forcefully cut apart, and they would not be able to take care of everything. It was precisely because these 2 places were so important that Feng Jin could not understand why Huang Song had sent a large number of troops to attack Cangzhou. Cangzhou was a place that had no money, no food, and no war horses. The war horses had already been plundered by the Lord. What else was there to gain? Feng Jin stared at the sand table in a daze. After a long time, he said, "Let's wait another day. We'll scout again and report." The battle between the feudal lords not only concerned the general situation of the world, but it also concerned the lives of one's family. If Huang Song wanted to win against the Lord, he could not make a single wrong move. Sending a large number of troops to attack Cangzhou was in itself a move that could not be any worse. His state of mind was firm. He was not the least bit frightened by the 80,000 troops that Huang Song had sent out. On the 5th day, the sky was just beginning to brighten. The thick fog on the surface of the Gorge River had yet to dissipate. Huang Song sent another 20,000 troops to cross the river on boats. Another 20,000? Feng Jin was dumbfounded. Had Huang Song and his tacticians really been kicked in the head by a donkey? The two sides were not attacking each other's lifeline in a chess match. Instead, they were taking advantage of the small fish and shrimp around them. Even Feng Jin could not understand what was going on. Dian Yin panted heavily. He raised his hand and wiped his face with his fan-like palm. Greasy, hot sweat soaked his palm, and he casually rubbed it on his armor. He had not taken this armor off for 2 days. The salt stains from the sweat that had dried stuck to the inner lining. It was quite uncomfortable, Dian Yin said. Counselor, even if we don't request reinforcements from the Lord, we should still report that Huang Song sent 100,000 troops to cross the Gorge River. 100,000? Did Huang Song fish out the coffin? Feng Jin raised an eyebrow. I will report to the Lord. Seeing this, Dian Yin could only sigh inwardly. Feng Jin's attitude was already very clear. He would rather put Sangzhou in danger to protect Wanzhou and Hu County. Thinking of this, Dian Yin's spirits were lifted. Only after resting could he fight the enemy to his heart's content. F***ck them. Just as Dian Yin was cursing his heart, Feng Jin said the troops that Huang Song sent were about 30,000 to 40,000. 30,000 to 40,000? The scouts reported that it was clearly 100,000. Dian Yin's cultural studies had been tutored by Yang Simeng. He could not compare to a professor of the 5 classics, but he could still count. It is precisely because the number of 100,000 is too large that the real number of troops is only 30,000 to 40,000. Feng Jin said, there's a saying in military strategy that all is fair in war. If Huang Song really sent 100,000 or even more troops to attack Sangzhou, why has there been no movement in the past 5 days? Feng Jin had no evidence, but he believed in his own judgment. Beside him, Meng Han was extremely surprised. Then this 100,000, Feng Jin frowned. I suspect that the enemy is probably divided into 2 groups. They cross the river during the day and circle back at night. The 2 groups take turns. They cross the river back and forth, causing the scouts to misjudge and mistakenly believe that the enemy has sufficient troops. If this is the case, everything makes sense. Dian Yin and Meng Han were speechless. Was there such a trick? Feng Jin continued. Of course, this is just speculation. Dian Yin and Meng Han simultaneously shuddered. If they could not withstand the psychological pressure exerted by the enemy and really requested for more troops, for the sake of caution, we still have to make a comprehensive response and not give the enemy a chance to take advantage of the situation. Even if Sangzhou was only a chicken rib, if he could swallow it, Huang Song could still gnaw some meat out of it. He had nothing to lose now, but his lord had to be cautious. Chapter 1259. Faced with Jiang Pengji's threat, Huang Song made up his mind to reorganize his forces. The first to be targeted was the Yuans. Half of the generals under Huang Song's command came from the Yuan clan. In order to curb the negative influence, he also put in a lot of effort. Yuan Xin, the informant, was taught a lesson. Yuan Xin was locked up in the small dark room for a while, and finally became obedient. Even if he still didn't like Nie Sun, he didn't continue to snitch on him. The expedition this time was related to Huang Song's life. Yuan Xin, the old die-hard fan, apologized to Nie Sun with a thorn branch on his back so that he could go to the front lines to continue fighting for his lord. After successfully reconciling with Nie Sun, Yuan Xin was once again used by Huang Song to be in charge of the Sangzhou battlefield. Feng Jin's previous analysis was not wrong. Huang Song's main target was not Sangzhou. This was considered a peripheral battlefront. Yuan Xin was unhappy that it wasn't the main battlefield. He had already swallowed his pride and apologized to Nie Sun. The two of them had also successfully reconciled. Why did the Lord no longer trust him? Instead of putting him in charge of the main battlefield, He was transferred to the periphery? Nyessa knew what he was thinking, but he didn't know what to say. That's right. Huangsong's maneuvering was extremely flashy. He let Nyessun be Yuan Xian strategist, and the two of them became partners. It wasn't that Huangsong did it on purpose. It was just that Nyessun understood Sangzhou well enough and had a gentle temperament. Therefore, not only did Nyessun have to deal with the official documents in the military and train his soldiers, he also had to appease the emotions of his old, die-hard fans. With his silver tongue, he successfully twisted the truth and made Yuan Xian think that Huangsong still valued Yuan Xian as much as before. What should he say? Although Sangzhou was of little value, it was of little value that attracted Jiang Pengji's main force. If he could exert pressure on her to misdeploy her troops, wouldn't that be a greater contribution than fighting on the battlefield? Nyessun's words were reasonable, and he had even drawn a beautiful blueprint for him. No matter how much Yuan Xian hated him, he was moved. Does the military advisor have a brilliant plan? Yuan Xian quickly asked Nyessun for advice. What is fake is real, and what is real is fake. Nyessun said, the essence of the art of war lies in the word craftiness. In other words, not only were there hot-blooded killings on the battlefield, but there were also treacherous contests that were not inferior to those in the imperial court. Even if he had the strength of 1,000 caddies, if he didn't have a plan to go along with it, he would just be a brute. Nyessun saw the impatience in Yuan Xian's eyes, so he straightforwardly told him his plan. Huangsong had only given Yuan Xian 45,000 soldiers and horses. Although these 45,000 soldiers and horses had all been trained, they were still far from being elites. Using these 45,000 men and horses to fight the enemy head-on was no different from sending one's head 1,000 miles away. The gift was light, but the sentiment was heavy. To the outside world, Nyessun raised the banner of 150,000 elites. Inside the camp, Nyessun ordered his troops to split into two groups. One group would cross the river while the other group would wait in the camp. After crossing the river, the first wave of troops marched to the east and set up camp. They would sneak back late at night when the water was foggy. The second wave of troops would cross the river the next day. By going back and forth like this, they could naturally create the illusion that a large army was pressing down on the border. According to Nyessun's judgment, there weren't many soldiers in Sangzhou. 80,000 soldiers was enough to put a great deal of pressure on them. As long as they could not withstand the psychological pressure, they would write letters to Jiang Pengji for reinforcements and make her make the wrong order to deploy troops. Their mission in the Sangzhou battlefield would be considered completed. It would be best if they could take down Wanzhou, but at the very least, they would take down Hu County. If they took down the former, Jiang Pengji's forces would be cut off, and Huangsong would be able to defeat them one by one. If they took down the latter, they would have sufficient provisions and could continue sailing for another 1 or 2 years. Unfortunately, Nyessun's plan was good enough, but his teammates dragged him down at the critical moment. Between 80,000 and 100,000, naturally, 100,000 was more powerful. Nyessun was not a military advisor, so his authority in the army was less than Yuan Xian's. Yuan Xian could accept his opinion or not. Therefore, Yuan Xian drew a snake with feet and added a stroke. This addition did not waver Feng Jin's determination. Instead, it made him even more certain of his judgment. Because it was too fake, Nyessun knew that Yuan Xian had taken matters into his own hands. He was so angry that his face turned green. Fortunately, there was no movement from Yuan Xian's side. Yuan Xian should not have done anything bad, so he reluctantly suppressed his anger. Yuan Xian did not feel that there was anything wrong. Instead, he asked Nyessun happily, "Military advisor, do you have another brilliant plan?" Nyessun wore a wooden expression. "Send scouts to scout out the various places and pretend that we're splitting up. Then, we'll heavily attack one place." Since they had created the illusion of 100,000 soldiers, they naturally had to show the confidence of 100,000 soldiers. Otherwise, how could they continue acting? Yuan Xian was puzzled. How are we going to split up? They did not have enough soldiers. Wasn't splitting up courting death? Sun said, "Just use the same trick." To the outside world, they said they were splitting up tens of thousands of soldiers, but in reality, there were only 1,000 or 2,000. The rest of the soldiers would concentrate on attacking one place. As long as the enemy mistakenly thought that they still had such a fierce fighting force after splitting up, coupled with the previous misdirection, they would naturally set up a false impression in their hearts that the enemy really had 100,000 soldiers, 50,000 in the open, and 50,000 in the dark preparing to cause trouble. Because there was a lag in the transmission of information on the battlefield, it was not difficult to deceive the enemy. Yuan Xin stopped talking. He still did not like Sun, but he had to admit that scholars were really evil at heart. If he were Sun's opponent, he would have long believed that the enemy had 100,000 soldiers. The horn of war had not sounded yet, but he had already lost his momentum. Sun's mechanics were indeed very flashy, but his opponent was no ordinary person either. He rarely moved on the battlefield, but it did not mean that he was weaker than others. Meng Hun was once a military officer under the Meng family. He was very familiar with the terrain of Sangzhou. When the scouts continuously sent back news, he guessed where the enemy planned to attack. He discussed with Feng Jin and Dian Yin for a long time, and finally decided on a preliminary battle plan. Close the door and beat the dogs. According to Feng Jin's previous suggestion, they would first let the enemy's forces penetrate deep into Sangzhou and show weakness to the enemy. When they became arrogant and complacent, they would then send out troops to intercept and kill them. The ordinary people had already evacuated in advance to avoid the disaster. Even if they gave up 1 or 2 cities, the loss would not be great. Feng Jin played along, and Yuan Xin and the rest met with very little resistance. They were not as fragile as paper, but they could not last more than a day. With such a fierce attack and chasing after the enemy, Yuan Xin took down 2 cities in a row. He was so happy that he could see his teeth, but not his eyes. He also found Sun much more pleasing to the eye. Military counselor really has good foresight. They are really afraid. Yuan Xin held the bronze wine goblet and drank a mouthful contentedly. The wine flowed from the corner of his mouth and slid down his neck. Looking at the situation, the rumor that the traitor Lu is seriously ill is probably true. We can take Sangzhou in less than half a month. By now, the letter requesting for reinforcements should have reached traitor Lu's side, right? It would be best if he dies of anger. That would be great. Sun frowned and looked at Yuan Xin. Alcohol was forbidden in the army, but this person liked to drink. He drank a little every once in a while. He was really not afraid of causing trouble. But the Lord Huangsong was not here, so no one could control Yuan Xin. Lu Shi is seriously ill. That is unexpected. Sun secretly shook his head. Chapter 1260. It had always been Jiang Pengji who angered people to death. When had others ever angered her? The battle in Sangzhou seemed to be losing ground, but everything was within Feng Jin's expectations. Yuan Xin was still unaware that he had fallen into the enemy's trap. He sent Huangsong 3 reports of victory. The contents of the reports exaggerated his role and deducted Sun's contribution. He admitted that Sun was indeed very smart, but he had personally led the troops to kill the enemy and attack the city. He had done it with his sword and spear. Sun had only moved his lips from beginning to end. Did he want to take most of the credit? Yuan Xin was naturally unwilling, but he had learned his lesson. He knew that Huangsong did not like him to be a spy and snitch. Other than deducting Sun's credit, he did not say anything bad about Sun. Sun was aware of his little tricks. He did not express his discomfort. The reports of victory came one after another. A few small victories dispelled the dark clouds in everyone's hearts. Huangsong felt the huge rock on his shoulders lighten a lot. It seems that Lu Shi is seriously ill. According to Feng Ju's impression of Jiang Pengji, this person was not willing to suffer any losses. If something had not really happened, how could he have allowed Sangzhou to suffer continuous losses? Not only was there no movement in Sangzhou, but the main forces were also becoming more and more conservative. They were like turtles huddled together, passive and lazy. In the eyes of outsiders, it was because Jiang Pengji, the backbone, had fallen ill that they were without a leader. That was why they used this method to delay time. Cheng Jing still had doubts, but when he saw Yuan Xian's successive reports of victory, he could not help but wonder if he was thinking too much. Could it be that Lu Shi had traumatized him so much that he viewed him as so terrifying? The people in the tent had long been dazzled by Jiang Pengji's words. Although they were not people who were eager for quick success, they did not want to see such a good opportunity be delayed. They all came out to persuade Huang Song. As the saying went, once the opportunity is missed, it will never come again. If they did not take advantage of Jiang Pengji's serious illness to attack Hu County and Wanzhou, could they wait until she recovered to confront them openly? Huang Song believed it. Now, that most of the people in the tent were in favor of sending troops, he did not hesitate. Jiang Pengji's territory was vast, and the battle line was long, so it was not suitable for her to provide support. Huang Song occupied Hejin County, so it was very convenient for him to divide his troops to attack. Not long after, the army received a secret report. Lu Shi dispatched 50,000 troops to reinforce Zhangzhou. Cheng Jing and the others shook their heads when they heard this. Although Yuan Xian had taken over a county in Zhangzhou, the front lines had not completely collapsed yet. Now that they had sent 50,000 reinforcements, it was clear that their enemies were panicking. Although these 50,000 troops could stabilize the occupation of Zhangzhou, they would also put Wanzhou and Hu County in danger. They all knew that Jiang Pengji was taking the route of an elite army. She only had about 200,000 to 300,000 troops. Dispatching 50,000 men to assist Zhangzhou was equivalent to sending 30% of his troops to Zhangzhou. Huang Song made a prompt decision to split his forces to attack Hu County and Wanzhou. Feng Zhu was in charge of the battlefront in Wanzhou, while he himself was in charge of attacking Hu County. Jiang Pengji's side only defended and did not attack. Although the line of defense had not been breached, they had fallen into a passive situation. Hu County was overseen by Cheng Yuan and Meng Heng, while Luo Yu commanded the troops and promoted several new generals. The situation was in a stalemate. Luo Yu was originally a commander of the Imperial Guards of Dongqing. Later, he was forcibly lured by Jiang Pengji onto the pirate ship. He simply resumed his old job in Xiangyang district of Wanzhou. All these years, he had been in charge of the security of the surrounding area. Luo Yu's efforts behind the scenes could not be ignored for so many years of peace in Wanzhou. It was too easy. At the same time, some of the generals were promoted and developed, but he was still in the same place. If it were not for the lack of manpower in Hu County, he would not have wanted to go to the front lines this time. Leading troops to war could cost lives. He just wanted to live comfortably. What Luo Yu lacked was not ability. If he was really incompetent, he would not have been able to become the commander of the Imperial Guards when Dongqing was still around. However, he was inclined to defend. Attacking was not his strong point. Jiang Pengji also knew Luo Yu's problem. She simply asked him to listen to Cheng Yuan and Meng Heng's suggestions. She also asked Han Yu, who was squatting in Zhe and Hu counties, to pay close attention to the situation in Hu County. If there was anything wrong, she would directly send troops to restrain Huang Song's troops and try to delay the battle until after the autumn harvest this year. Hu County was a major grain-producing county. This year's autumn harvest might be the most important part of this decisive battle. Hu County had been peaceful for so long. Suddenly, it was under pressure from a large number of troops. The people were in a panic. Luo Yu originally wanted to go out of the city to face the attack, but it was not a solution to keep defending. The people in Hu County were easily shaken. Military counselor, Huang Song has been attacking us for several days. It is not a good idea for us to avoid the battle. If it was possible, Luo Yu really wanted to lead his troops out of the city to fight and destroy the enemy's prestige and arrogance. Meng Heng and Cheng Yuan were also very helpless because Jiang Pengji's order was to defend, and they could not easily send troops out. Hearing this, Meng Heng could not help but frown. He said unhappily, "It has only been a few days since the battle started. The troops of both sides have not really fought, and the outcome has not been decided. The enemy has not even stepped half a step into Hu County. The enemy is not anxious yet, and we have already begun to retreat. Hu is causing trouble behind our backs. Hu County had a lot of grain reserves. They were not afraid of a war of attrition. It had only been a few days. Why was there someone stirring up trouble already? Luo Yu also did not understand. War was not a matter of 1 or 2 days. It was normal for a tug of war to last for half a year or even several months. It was the first time he saw someone so impatient. I will send people to investigate. I will not let the culprit go if he is caught. Meng Hung said, I will have to trouble General Luo to take care of this matter. Luo Yu sent people to investigate in secret. He caught a few people who were spreading rumors and killed them in public to correct the situation. After killing a few people who were spreading rumors, the morale of the army was stabilized. After this incident, Meng Hung smelled something different. He asked Luo Yu to kill a few people, and the others who were more well-hidden were secretly watching them. Luo Yu did not understand. Why not kill these people too? Leaving them alive is a disaster after all. Meng Hung frowned deeply. He was deep in thought. Cheng Yuan, who was beside him, helped to explain. Naturally, it is to cast a long line to catch a big fish. Our Lord has given us a death order to defend Hu County. We must not suffer any losses. Both sides have been in a stalemate at the border of Hu County for a few days. Under the situation where we have yet to show any signs of defeat, someone has taken the opportunity to stir up trouble and spread rumors that our army will definitely lose, shaking the morale of the army. Officer Luo, don't you think this is a little strange? It is never wrong to be more cautious. Meng Hung and Cheng Yuan were cautious people. They did not seek to be meritorious, but to not make mistakes. Meng Hung was also older and more mature than Cheng Yuan. It was not wrong to listen to him. Luo Yu said, Isn't the morale of the army shaken because our Lord announced to the public that she is seriously ill? She was so ill that she was about to die. She did not even have an heir. It would be strange if those who did not know the truth did not panic. Cheng Yuan shook his head and asked Luo Yu, Officer Luo, what do you think of the army in our Lord's tent? Chapter 1261. This wasn't a brainless boast. Luo Yu truly believed that the so-called elite troops under the Lord's tent were far inferior to them. Not only were they extremely mobile, but their combat quality was also the highest he'd ever seen in his life. One of the main reasons he was able to maintain such good security in Wanzhou was because of the strength of the troops under his command. If that's the case, when the Lord is seriously ill and there are foreign invaders, they should be riled up and swear to annihilate the enemy instead of being afraid to fight and spreading rumors, Cheng Yuan said. I suspect that these people are being manipulated, and the mastermind behind the scenes is the main culprit. How could they feel at ease if they didn't dig out the hidden dangers? They were fighting anxiously at the front, and if someone suddenly stabbed them in the back, it would be over. Li Yue's eyes turned cold, and he said solemnly, The 2 counselors are really thoughtful. He took this matter to heart and sent people to keep a close eye on those people in secret. After a few days, there was progress. After following the clues, Luo Yu was shocked by the information he found. When he took a closer look, he was so angry that his beard was about to fly up. He hurriedly suppressed his boiling anger and sent someone to discuss it with Luo Yu and Meng Hung. The soldier who spread the rumors was a local grain transport worker recruited from Hu County. What did a grain transport worker do? They were mainly responsible for the supply of logistics and ensuring the continuation of the battle. If there was a problem with the grain supply, how could the frontline soldiers fight the war? The 2 counselors probably wouldn't have guessed who was secretly contacting them. Liu Yu's gaze was deep, and his tone was solemn. His clenched fists and tensed veins exposed his current state of mind. Meng Hung and Cheng Yuan looked at each other and asked in unison, Who is it? Luo Yu pointed at the position of the sand table. The 2 looked and saw that it was right inside Hu County. A mole? The same word popped up in their minds, and their faces darkened. How could it be a mole? There were no signs before this. Fortunately, they discovered it early. If they waited for the 2 sides to really enter a stalemate and the mole stabbed them again, they would be dead. Luoyue said with a sullen face. I heard that Hu County is what it is today because of the old master. When the old master was appointed as the county governor of Hu County, he had spent a great deal of effort in order to rectify the local bandits that ran amok and the landowning families that seized the people's farmland. These landowning households have learned their lesson and have been behaving themselves all these years. They've watched as so much fertile land returned to the common people, but they haven't tasted the sweetness themselves. It's not like they haven't borne a grudge in their hearts. Before Lu Shi became the county chief of Hu County had been a barren land and unruly rivers. Bandits roamed about. The country gentry exploited them, and there were years of drought. Those who could escape had all fled, and those who couldn't had all accepted their fate. It was like hell on earth. The local powers were used to being the local tyrants. They refused to accept that there was someone controlling them. 9 successive prefectural governors died in office or on the way to their new posts. Some died in the hands of bandits, some died in their plots, and some died in collusion with officials and bandits. Not only did Lu Shi survive, but he also forcibly opened the mouths of the local powers. He personally took a lot of benefits from them and distributed them to the common people. He reclaimed wasteland, dug water sources, and changed tax policies. Under his rule, Hu County became a major grain-producing county in Dongqing. The local landowning households and the country gentry also benefited from this, but they weren't satisfied because the common people and the land they farmed were their property. If Lu Shi hadn't interfered, the income generated from these properties would have been theirs. In other words, Lu Shi had taken away their interests, and it wasn't just a little. However, the situation was stronger than they were. They couldn't defeat Lu Shi or Lu Shi, so they could only swallow their grievances. Now that the enemy was at the gates of the city, it was a good time to take advantage of the chaos to redistribute. Feng Zhu, who worked under Huang Song, was quite cunning. He had already sent spies to Hu County to investigate before the war started. He knew that Hu County wasn't as united as a piece of iron. People's faces were flushed with wine, and people's hearts were moved by money. Feng Zhu firmly grasped their weakness and used it as a breakthrough to incite defection. However, these people weren't really stupid. People who pursued benefits were always very precise when it came to calculating gains and losses. On one hand, they kept Huang Song in suspense, but on the other, they behaved themselves. Their attitudes were quite ambiguous, and they didn't offend either side. Who knew that Jiang Pengji would actually fall ill? He was bedridden and didn't have an heir. His situation was terrible. Songzhou had lost, and Huang Song's forces had taken over a county. The battlefront in Wanzhou and Hu County were passively attacked. From the looks of it, Huang Song's side was in a good situation. Even God was on his side. At this moment, these speculators began to panic. If war was compared to business, they would invest in the early stages and naturally have to plunder the spoils of war to make up for the expenses in the later stages. Fighting the local tyrants was the best choice. If they didn't do something now, would Huang Song let go of their property when he really attacked Hu County? He would definitely slaughter them. Some forces in Hu County secretly sided with Huang Song without hesitation. Although they didn't help Huang Song much, they sent people to spread rumors and shake the army's morale. This was considered a deposit and a demonstration of their attitude. When the situation of the war gradually became clear and Huang Song developed, they would increase their investment until they completely sided with him. The investment was risky, but the returns were great. If they gambled correctly, the prosperity of the family was just around the corner. Luoyue only found out this much, but it already made him extremely angry. I only hate that the old master didn't kill them all back then. Why didn't he slaughter all these troublemakers? Luoyue's tone was quite harsh. Anyone who knew that someone was going to stab them in the back would feel uncomfortable. If they were killed earlier, it wouldn't be so disgusting today. Meng Heng's eyes slanted, and he said softly, "General Luoyue, be careful with your words. How could he speak ill of the Lord's father? If this got out, wouldn't Luoyue be afraid that he would make things difficult for him?" Luoyue's face darkened, and he kept his mouth shut. Hold back for now and collect evidence of their betrayal and collusion with the enemy. Once we have the evidence, we'll lock them up and wait for the Lord to deal with them. Meng Hung looked calm on the surface, but he was gritting his teeth in anger. He didn't believe that with his lord's hot temper, she could tolerate such a shameful betrayal. Luo Yue thought that Meng Hung wanted to be lenient and was instantly unhappy. Cheng Yuan reminded him, think about the group of people in Chongzhou. When Jiang Pengji first arrived in Chongzhou, there was a bloody incident as soon as she landed. The leaders of a few large clans were killed by her. Although the members of the clan were not affected, they were suppressed to the point where they could not lift their heads. The entire clan could only live with their tails between their legs. How many years had it been? They had fallen to an unimaginable level. As long as the Lord was strong, the few clans in Chongzhou who had offended her could forget about rising again in this lifetime. On the contrary, the Cui family of Chongzhou had good foresight. They clung to the Lord's golden thighs and used the rice paper to accumulate a rich family fortune. Back then, they only killed a few leaders because the Lord had forcefully shifted the blame to the evidence of collusion with the enemy. The group of short-sighted fools in Hu County. Once the evidence was conclusive, wouldn't they turn their entire clan upside down? Meng Hung said in a low voice, "The Lord has a strong temper. If this matter reaches her ears, she won't be able to tolerate it if she doesn't kill a bunch of them." Tolerate. I'll give them 3 consecutive Taoist pampering. Chapter 1262. Luo Yu thought of his lord's firecracker temper and changed his attitude instantly. Not only was he not as angry as before, but he also pitted the local bully of Hu County. Of all the times to court death, why did she have to do it at this juncture? Even if she was in a hurry to reincarnate, she shouldn't be in such a hurry. Outsiders thought that their lord was seriously ill, but they, as her confidants, knew very well that not only was the lord not sick, but she was also full of anger and wanted to chop people up. Pretending to be sick and taking a detour to attack Huang Song's base camp. Such an operation was out of this world. Other than kneeling and cheering for her, the salted fish could only watch from the sidelines. Don't talk, watch her carry the whole game. Jiang Pengji swaggered with 50,000 troops to take a detour under Huang Song's nose to annihilate the retreat route. Sangzhou suffered successive defeats, and the situation was critical. Jiang Pengji simply took advantage of the situation and led 50,000 troops to attack Sangzhou. On the surface, she was on at Sangzhou, but in reality, she was going to the north for a while along the Song River in Sangzhou to attack Huang Song's Qinzhou. Huang Song's troops landed on the shore of the Gorge River in the middle and lower reaches of the Song River and attacked Sangzhou. The tens of thousands of troops gradually entered the hinterland of Sangzhou. They were still immersed in the successive victories and could not react for a while, let alone turn around to support Qinzhou, which was adjacent at Sangzhou. Huang Song's base was in Haozhou. Qinzhou had only been under operation for a year or two, so its defense was naturally not as stable as Haozhou's base camp. She had previously shot herself in the foot by pretending to be sick and bedridden. That feeling was like being in prison. Now that she was out leading troops, she could let go of herself. Even the tips of her eyebrows were dyed with joy, and the surrounding atmosphere seemed friendly and casual. She was dressed in a red and white military uniform, riding a horse and galloping. The tail feathers on her helmet were pressed low by the strong wind that was blowing against her. Wazir Xiao Longbao. I don't know why, but seeing the streamer so excited, I feel like I've seen a husky. Ishio Xiniangxiang. I agree with the one above, and she's a husky who's out for fresh air. Puchi Pusixio. I agree with the one above, and she's a husky who's out for fresh air. Ain't in Bao Bao good. Don't be like this of our streamer. If you say that, I don't dare to look at the streamer's beauty. Bao Bao Lao's Wei Tang. A husky's pillow is nothing. Bao Bao like I Tang. What's the big deal about a husky bolster? Bao Bao had entered a silly group. A group of people were exchanging their experiences in raising live streamers. Everyone in their world knew about Jiang Pengji's streaming room. The officials stepped forward to open an official Weibo account and specially assigned people to manage it. The number of fans had already reached 1 billion. Adding up the two planes, it was at least 5 billion. It was clear how terrifying her popularity was. A while ago, Jiang Pengji mobilized 50,000 troops and horses to counterattack. The official blog post mischievously changed the profile picture to that of a husky who was happily riding a horse. The husky wore a red and white military uniform, and its tail feathers fluttered in the wind. It looked as if it was finally able to breathe fresh air. The resemblance was so great that people could not help but laugh. The new avatar received unanimous praise from the fans, and, at the same time, it also stimulated the enthusiasm of the fans to raise a husky. They couldn't get close to Jiang Pengji, but they could raise a husky that looked like the streamer. Jiang Pengji was speechless. She felt that she was very naughty, but compared to this group of idle fish in the audience, there seemed to be a gap. Thanks to the jesting of the group of salted fish, Jiang Pengji's march did not seem boring. Instead, it was enjoyable. Ouch! My old waist. It almost broke. Jingrong, come over and take a look. Yang Si was asked by Jiang Pengji to follow the army. The 7 to 8 days of rapid travel had made him suffer a lot. The road was difficult to travel on, and the galloping horse carriage almost made him tremble with bitterness. For the sake of his life, he chose to ride a horse. He used the softest and most comfortable horse harness, but after a day of jolting, his legs were so weak that they did not feel like they belonged to him. Not only did his thighs hurt, but his buttocks and waist also hurt. He felt as if he was being dismantled and reassembled. After this battle, he finally knew his position in his lord's heart. Wei Si could represent his lord to attend the funeral of the old lord in Hejin County. Yang Si was not jealous. After all, this treatment was obtained by Wei Si, sacrificing himself to feed the devil. Why could Qiguan Rang stay at the front lines of Wanzhou to stop the troops led by Feng Zhu, but he had to be carried by his lord to run around the front lines? Could it be that Qiguan Rang was good at scheming, but he was not? He really did not want to run around with his lord. Wei Si was his lord's cotton-padded jacket. Qiguan Rang was her best friend. Only he was an omnipotent brick. He would move wherever he was lacking. He had everything, but he did not have human rights. Yang Si was full of complaints. He did not know how many times he had complained in the past few days, but he did not dare to say it in front of Jiang Pengji. He could only observe in secret, occasionally looking at her with a resentful and pitiful gaze. Jiang Pengji did not care about the actor Yang Si, but the idle spectators would not ignore his performance. Some busybodies counted for Yang Si to see how many times he had to watch it before he could attract Jiang Pengji's attention. The more the idle spectators behaved like this, the more Jiang Pengji ignored Yang Si's gaze. Yang Si was speechless, hugging myself tightly with heartache. JPG, Yang Si had enough rest. He stood up with his hands on his knees. He walked awkwardly to a position one step behind Jiang Pengji. With the advantage of the cavalry, they directly broke through the border defense line of Qinzhou. From now on, they had to be careful with every step they took. This was the enemy's territory, and their logistics and food supply lines were not abundant. They could not be too reckless. It will take at least half a month for Huang Song's side to react. Yang Si estimated the distance between the two places and came up with a rough figure in his heart. Half a month. Jiang Pengji rubbed her chin and said with a smile, "It's about time. Let's have some fun in this half a month. We came all the way to Bogeo's territory. The host should do as the guest pleases. If we go back empty-handed without doing anything, wouldn't that be too disrespectful to the host?" Yang Si secretly curled his lips and sympathized with Huang Song for 3 seconds. The host should do as the guest pleases? Wouldn't his lord turn Qinzhou upside down? Qinzhou's garrison forces were weak. Of the 50,000 troops that his lord had brought, 10% were cavalry. The rest were elites with strong physical qualities. If they really wanted to have fun, Qinzhou would not last at all. Jiang Pengji had outflanked Qinzhou, which was behind Huang Song, not to expand the results of the battle or anything else. To put it bluntly, she was there to cause trouble. Huang Song was fighting at the front lines, so she turned his nest upside down. It was not easy to take advantage of her. Most of the time, she had to pay the price with her life. Relying on her strong mobility, Jiang Pengji really did what she said she would. She caused trouble in every place and left with the spoils of war. When the logistics and food supply lines were insufficient, she used the battle to support the battle. She robbed the food that had been stored in various important towns, fighting while plundering. By the time the urgent report reached Huang Song's ears, Jiang Pengji had already occupied a small part of Qinzhou. She carried all the food that could be taken away in the supply wagons. What could not be taken away was thrown to the people of Qinzhou as a gift. If it were someone else, they would definitely bring people to destroy the cultivated land. But Jiang Pengji could not do such a wicked thing. She would leave the fertile land for them. Anyway, Qinzhou would be hers in the end. She could not be too ruthless. What? Huang Song almost suspected that he was hearing things. When did 50,000 troops appear and go to Qinzhou? Chapter 1263. Who would have thought that the troops that were supposed to support Songzhou would go straight to Qinzhou? Cheng Jing and the others couldn't be blamed for not thinking about it. Jiang Pengji had thrown out too many smoke bombs. She was willing to give up Songzhou as a county to deceive the enemy and affect their judgment. How could a normal person think of such a ruthless method to kill 1,000 enemies while sacrificing 800 men? She was a living lunatic. Huang Song wasn't Jiang Pengji. The latter had a large family business and was willing to give up Songzhou, but the former couldn't ignore Qinzhou. He could either send troops to support Qinzhou or let Yuan Xian, who was closest to him, lead troops to outflank Jiang Pengji's retreat. Faced with these two choices, even a blind man would know which one to choose. Cheng Jing said, "Distant water can't put out a nearby fire. I'm afraid the Lord won't make it in time if he leads the troops back now." Huang Song sighed and said, "I know, so I can only let Lieutenant Yuan Xian lead the troops to encircle and suppress them." Fortunately, he let Nie Sun follow the troops. Otherwise, Yuan Xian would have suffered a great loss in Jiang Pengji's hands. Yuan Xian received the news one step earlier than Huang Song. He was so angry that he wanted to rush to Jiang Pengji and tear her into pieces. Of course, Jiang Pengji was still a patient. They didn't know that she was the general leading the troops. But this didn't affect Yuan Xian's strong urge to skin her alive and break her bones. "You're making me so angry." Yuan Xian was so angry that he smashed the table into two. Even the great victory not long ago couldn't make him feel happy. It was a great shame and humiliation for his own home to be attacked by the enemy like there was no man's land. After smashing the table, Yuan Xian picked up his weapon angrily, but he was stopped by Nie Sun before he could take 2 steps. "General, what are you going to do?" Nie Sun couldn't let Yuan Xian do whatever he wanted. What if he ran into the enemy's trap? Yuan Xian narrowed his eyes. His fierce eyes looked more dangerous, making Nie Sun feel like he was being stared at by a beast. "Military counselor, what do you think I'm going to do?" "Of course, I'm going to count the troops and kill them. Are we going to let that thief continue to wreak havoc in Qinzhou?" Huang Song only had Haozhou and Qinzhou. He couldn't compare to Jiang Pengji's large family business. They couldn't afford to lose any of them. They had let down their guard and allowed Jiang Pengji to take advantage of their weakness, causing the defense line at the rear to fall. Fortunately, it was not too late to mend the pen after the sheep were lost. Nie Sun's heart skipped a beat. With a pale face, he advised, "General, you can't. You can't." Yuan Xian didn't expect that Nie Sun would say such words. Instantly, he was so angry that his eyes almost split open, and he pushed Nie Sun away. Nie Sun was caught off guard and fell backwards. The atmosphere at the scene immediately froze. Yuan Xian's hand was stretched out in midair, and a trace of regret flashed in his eyes. No matter how reckless he was, he knew that scholars were not as thick-skinned as martial artists. Scholars were extremely arrogant, and that action, just now, was a great humiliation. Military advisor, yeah, I didn't mean it. I really didn't mean it. Please forgive me, military advisor. I hope that a great man will forgive me. Yuan Xion's anger was temporarily suppressed, and he hurriedly took remedial measures, reaching out his hand to help Nyesun up. At this moment, Nyesun was also furious. He flicked his sleeve and slapped Yuan Xion's hand away. His eyes were bloodshot, making the color of the cinnabar between his brows even darker. Yuan Xion was very embarrassed. He didn't mean to push Nyesun. Nyesun was a man, after all. How could Nyesun not even stand properly and fall so hard with just one push? Nyesun's tone was extremely cold. May I ask, General, if you're bringing troops back to Qinzhou now, are you going to cross the Gorge River? Yuan Xion said matter-of-factly. Of course I'm going to cross the river. Nyesun asked again, does it take time to cross the river? If we cross to the middle of the river, what if the enemy attacks us from both sides? Yuan Xion felt that Nyesun's words were exaggerated. Military advisor, you're worrying too much. The enemy in Songzhou isn't a threat, and the enemy in Qinzhou can't care about us right now. If the enemy is smart, they won't even have time to escape. Why would they specifically guard the riverbank of the Gorge River? He couldn't stand Nyesun praising others' morale and belittling his own. It was as if he was weak, no matter how good others were. Nyesun's already ugly expression became even more unfriendly. He originally thought that Yuan Xion's act of offering a humble apology was sincere repentance, but now it seemed that even a dog couldn't stop itself from eating shit. Nyesun rarely cursed in his heart. No matter how bad his teammates were, as a strategist, he had to fulfill his duties and obligations. He had to pinch his nose and force himself to communicate with Yuan Xion, the blockhead. Apart from worrying about being trapped in the Gorge River and beaten to death, Nyesun also had to let Yuan Xion remember what a military order was. Without a specific military order from his lord, Huang Song, he couldn't act rashly. So what if Qinzhou was in danger? Yuan Xion's task was to restrain the troops in Songzhou and attract Jiang Pengji's main forces. If he acted willfully and arbitrarily transferred troops, once the entire plan was ruined, could he shoulder the responsibility alone? As a general, not only did he have to listen to his lord's orders, but he also had to be responsible for his troops. If Yuan Xion acted willfully because of loyalty, he wouldn't even know how he died one day. Nyesun suppressed his anger. He had no choice but to break down all logic and force it onto Yuan Xion. If this rash and boorish martial artist still refused to listen to his advice, he really couldn't do anything about it. Because Nyesun mentioned Huang Song, Yuan Xion had no way to vent his anger. He could only listen obediently. In the end, he reluctantly agreed to Nyesun's arrangements. The relationship between the two of them that they had worked so hard to ease immediately became tense. It seemed like nothing much, but in reality, undercurrents were surging and they were as incompatible as fire and water. Nyesun asked Yuan Xion to count his troops in retreat as he fought. He would slowly let go of the counties in Songzhou that he had previously conquered. At the same time, he sent troops to observe the situation in the Gorge River to avoid the worst-case scenario of being attacked from both sides. Reality proved that Nyesun's caution was not without reason. Jiang Pengji also had the idea of making dumplings out of dumplings. She had already sent people to keep an eye on the Gorge River. In other words, if Yuan Xion dared to come, she dared to fight. She would definitely make sure that Yuan Xion and his troops would never return. Feng Jin also felt that it was a pity. Yuan Xion is a man of martial arts, but no brains. He's stubborn and arrogant. With a little misdirection, he won't be able to find his bearings. Nyesun, on the other hand, is a bit tricky. My lord is still too kind. If she had killed Nyesun back then, Nyesun and Huang Song would be completely at odds. Everyone in Wanzhou knew that Nyesun and Meng Hung were brothers. They also knew that Meng Hung had followed Jiang Pengji's instructions to set up a trap for his brother. They also knew that Meng Hung had followed Jiang Pengji's instructions to set up a trap for his brother. When that time came, the Lord would lead the troops to block the banks of the Gorge River and block Yuan Xion's way forward. He would lead the troops to block Yuan Xion's way back. It was a perfect strategy to make dumplings out of dumplings. However, Nie Sun, who was on Yuan Xian's side, was not easily fooled. He could almost see the tacit understanding between Feng Jin and Jiang Pengji at a glance. Meng Han had been working under Jiang Pengji for a long time. He had even worked under the Mengs before. He was very clear about the grudges between them. He said regretfully, "No matter what, Nie Sun is Shurjio's biological brother and my lord's cousin. If he were to kill him, my lord would not be able to explain it to the old mistress." Chapter 1264. As the saying goes, if the mountain is not me, I will be the mountain. Even if Yuan Xian wanted to hide, he had to see if Feng Jin was willing to let him go. Did he want to leave after taking advantage of the situation and flaunting his power? How could Nie Sun know Sangzhou better than Meng Han? Meng Han was born and raised in Sangzhou. However, Nie Sun was difficult to deal with. He had to think of a way to make him lower his guard. Feng Jin's eyes flashed. He had an idea. Meng Han had been with these strategists for a long time. He more or less understood the rules. "Do you have a plan?" Feng Jin smiled. "It's not difficult. Nie Sun will definitely be on guard when he passes by the river. It won't be easy for us to succeed. Since that's the case, why don't we let them cross the river smoothly? When they engage in close combat with the Lord, we will follow closely behind and cross the river to cut off their retreat route." Many feudal lords would seize suitable crossings when they were at war. This was to ensure that their side would not be harassed by the enemy when they crossed the river. Everyone knew the saying, "Attack halfway across the river." That was why armies were always cautious when they encounter a river. Nie Sun was no exception. Everyone knew that the process of crossing the river would be affected. If it was light, the army would be injured. If it was heavy, the entire army would be annihilated. The most typical example was the battle between Jiang Pengji and the northern borderline. The entire northern borderline was trapped. Nie Sun was not as stupid as the northern borderline. According to normal thinking, Feng Jin should follow closely behind and wait for Yuan Xian's army to cross the river before launching a surprise attack. Nie Sun would definitely be on guard against this. Even if Feng Jin succeeded, the results would be minimal. Since that was the case, they might as well do the opposite. They would let Yuan Xian's army cross the river. Then they would send troops to occupy the river crossings and block their retreat route. When Yuan Xian and Jiang Pengji's troops met, the front was tense and the back was empty. Then they would stab them. The same plan, but the order was reversed. The results were completely different. On the other side, under Nie Sun's earnest persuasion, Yuan Xian could only retreat with his troops, leaving only a portion of his troops to guard the battlefield. The journey was peaceful. There were no unexpected incidents. Everything about the military advisor is good, except for the bad habit of exaggerating and raising other people's morale while diminishing your own prestige. The troops of Sangzhou are weak. What's there to worry about? Along the way, weren't there only defeated soldiers and generals? The huge Sangzhou is like a piece of paper that will break with one poke. Yuan Xian sat on the back of a large horse, grumbling unhappily to the deputy generals on both sides, his rough face full of impatience. The enemy was clearly so weak, but Nie Sun still had to act as if he was facing a great enemy. He even made Yuan Xian unable to do anything, which was very annoying. The two deputy generals beside him looked embarrassed. Their words carried little weight, and they were also Yuan Xian's deputy generals, so it was not good for them to speak up for Nie Sun. Troubled times were a good time for generals to make a name for themselves. The two deputy generals had both risen through the ranks by virtue of their military exploits, but they couldn't compare to Yuan Xian, who was a relative of the Lord's. There were some things that Yuan Xian could say without the slightest scruple, but the two deputy generals could not say so casually, lest they cause trouble and make enemies. Although they also felt that Nie Sun was making a mountain out of a molehill, the military counselor's words definitely made sense. There was nothing wrong with listening more. On the other hand, his general's temper was like a firecracker. He would explode at the slightest provocation and lose his temper at the slightest provocation. A successful general should be good at listening and have his own opinions. The headstrong Yuan Xin could only do the latter. He directly ignored the former. The two of them could only act as mediators. They tried to smooth things over and not offend anyone. Niesun was still some distance away from the vanguard troops, so he didn't hear what they said. But looking at Yuan Xin, he guessed that he couldn't say anything good. After traveling for a few days, they were less than half a day's journey away from Gorge River. The entire army was tense, guarding against any sneak attacks from the enemy. What was the result? Not to mention a sneak attack from the pursuing troops, there wasn't even a shadow. Yuan Xin displayed his prowess in Sangzhou, but he didn't even dare to let out a fart, let alone sneak an attack like Niesun had said. After spending half a day crossing the river, when everyone arrived at the opposite bank and got into formation, there was still no sign of the enemy. Yuan Xin looked proud. It was as if he didn't see Niesun's expression and deliberately asked, "Military counselor, the enemy troops in Sangzhou have been scared out of their wits by us. It seems that they don't even dare to chase after us." Niesun said that Feng Jin would lead troops to chase after them, but he didn't. Niesun said that Jiang Pengji would lead troops to block their way at Gorge River, but she didn't. Niesun said that the enemy would jump out and attack when they crossed the river, but they didn't. Scholars only know how to talk nonsense with their mouths. What else can they do besides talk? Yuan Xin really didn't understand. Niesun was a guy who only knew how to talk nonsense. What did he have that made Huang Song think so highly of him? He was very proud now. Niesun's mistake meant that his judgment was correct. Niesun rode his horse with his head lowered. He didn't say a word for a long time, but his face was pale. Yuan Xin felt bored when he saw that Niesun didn't respond. After arriving in Qinzhou, Yuan Xin gathered the remaining troops and sent scouts to find out where Jiang Pengji's troops had wandered off to. Jiang Pengji's group was as slippery as mud loaches. It was very difficult to catch them because they relied on the rogue tactics of using war to sustain war and their strong mobility. Yuan Xin and the others had just crossed Gorge River. Feng Jin started to restore the lost territory and eliminate the 10,000 troops Yuan Xin had left behind. Meng Hun mocked. "You want to defend Song Prefecture with just 10,000 troops? I'm afraid you're too naive." Although Sun used some tricks to create the illusion of 100,000 troops, Feng Jin had long seen through his tricks. Yuan Xin couldn't bear to part with the spoils of war he had just won. He disregarded Sun's opponents and divided the already small number of troops. In other words, he only had 34,000 troops to stop Jiang Pengji. Could they defeat 50,000 elites? How could 10,000 soldiers defend a county? They could barely defend a prefecture. Meng Hun used his fingers to calculate the disparity in military strength between the two armies. He felt that, military counselor, isn't it not good to bully people like this? His lord had 50,000 troops. He and Feng Jin would bring another 15,000 troops. That would be 65,000 against 34,000. The former also had the attribute of a sneak attack and a critical hit. Even if Yuan Xin was fighting on his home ground and had a certain bonus in terms of manpower and logistics, which could increase the number of troops to 50,000 to 60,000, he couldn't stand being trampled on. Feng Jin laughed. "General Meng, if you think it's not good, you can watch from the sidelines and wait for my lord to settle the score." Who didn't know how to watch from the sidelines? Find a spectator, stand with a good view, set up a straw shed, hug some fruits, and be comfortable. If they dared to do this, how could they explain to their lord that Yuan Xin had gone deep in its Song Prefecture? Meng Hun also thought of this and made up his mind. "It's better for you to die than for me." Meng Hun and the others used the fastest speed to attack their lost territory. At the same time, they seized the crossing of Gorge River and crossed the river to chase after Yuan Xin's army. Chapter 1265. The horse's hooves landed on the ground with a hurried clatter. Report: traces of enemy troops have been discovered 20 miles ahead. The scout in the vanguard galloped over inside. He grabbed the reins to stop the war horse and hurriedly dismounted to report. 20 miles? They're really eager to die. Jiang Pengji sneered. I already know about this. Inform military advisor Yang to come over. Jiang Pingji sent the scout away unhurriedly. She lowered her head and ate half of the roasted lamb leg in her right hand. You have to fight a war, but you have to feed your stomach too. Xinjia, I'm crying from laughing. Streamer, you should at least respect your enemy. They're about to attack. Zuiyun Cat Yao. That's why people say that the streamer is too infuriating. The enemy is attacking aggressively, but she's still eating the whole roasted lamb leg. This is a serious battle streaming room, not a gourmet streaming room. Her opponent had to always carry an oxygen tank, or else he wouldn't be able to bear the injury. Why did he have to carry an oxygen tank? Because Jiang Pengji's actions were so coquettish that it was suffocating. Meng Xian, I don't agree with student Xinjia's words. If the streamer respected the enemy and put down the lamb leg, wouldn't she be disrespecting the lamb that contributed its body? The war could be fought any time, but a roasted lamb leg was the most delicious to eat while it was hot. Coincidentally, Jiang Pengji thought so too. Yang Si rushed over in a hurry and happened to see Jiang Pengji gnawing on the shredded meat hanging from the lamb leg and throwing the bones into the fire. She took out a handkerchief to wipe her mouth and the oil on her hands. She looked at him in a leisurely manner. As if she didn't see Yang Si's broken and twisted expression, she said calmly, Jing Rong is here? Sit. Yang Si's heart was indeed broken. The roasted lamb was roasted by him and supplemented with various seasonings. It was golden and tender. He didn't even have time to take a bite before he went to the toilet for a while. When he came back, the lamb was brutally dismembered and died without a whole body. All of it went into his lord's stomach. Everyone knew that Yang Si was a foodie. The audience saw him staring at the pile of lamb bones with a solemn expression and laughed unkindly. Jingying, Xiao Rong Rong, don't cry. I roasted a whole lamb for 560 renminbi. I'll buy as much as you want. Ragdoll Mao Guliang. Sigh, the streamer is getting more and more insane. She even bullies such a cute little angel like Xiao Rong Rong. Even though she was condemned by thousands of people, Jiang Pengji's skin was as thick as the corner of the city wall. She had reached the peak of the golden bell shield and the iron shirt. She was truly invulnerable. She said with a natural expression, the enemy is already 20 li away. Jingrong, do you have any countermeasures? Yang Si secretly took a deep breath and suppressed the urge to strangle his lord. It would be best if he could strangle him to death, but if he couldn't, he would be killed instead. It was not worth it. He said, the enemy has come prepared. It's obvious that they're coming for our army. Since I can't avoid it, I might as well attack head-on. Yang Si was suppressing his anger at this moment. If the enemy foolishly bumped into him, he would be letting himself down if he didn't beat him up. Jiang Pengji said, I think so too. Using current units of measurement, 20 li was about 8,100 meters. This distance could not be considered near, but it could not be considered far either. If it were an ordinary army, this distance would be a little hasty, and they could only hastily engage in battle. On Jiang Pengji's side, it was different. She could compress the battle distance to 10 miles. If the enemy launched an attack from 4,000 meters away, the chaotic army could get into formation and prepare for battle during the time when the enemy was charging. 20 li was still a very wide distance for Jiang Pengji. Because they were in someone else's territory and the weather was not considered hot, the generals and soldiers would not easily take off their armor even when they were resting. When they heard the sound of the horn, all the generals and soldiers immediately tensed up. One by one, they grabbed their weapons and ran to gather in formation. Yang Si immediately gave the order to use a military formation that was loose on the outside but tight on the inside to create the illusion that the enemy was fighting in a hurry. After waiting for a while, the gravel lying on the ground jumped because of the ground vibration. The enemy's footsteps were dull and powerful. Banners fluttered, the wind howled, and the yellow sand flew. Countless figures appeared and disappeared. Qinzhou was Huang Song's territory. While Yuan Xian searched for traces of the enemy, he sent people to gather the remaining soldiers. The total number of troops rose to 50,000. Knowing Jiang Pingji's whereabouts, he did not rush to find her to fight to the death. Instead, he let the entire army rest for 2 days to recover their strength. Yuan Xin was not stupid enough to use an exhausted army to fight the enemy head-on. The enemy is lightly armed and has traveled a long distance to attack Shenzhou. Although there are many of them, there is nothing to be afraid of. Yuan Xin was full of confidence. Fighting a war not only depended on the people, but also on the army's supplies and configuration. Jiang Pingji had led 50,000 troops to attack Shenzhou and stir up trouble here. Naturally, she could not bring weapons of war that had a large target. Not to mention large weapons such as ballistae, scaling ladders, and catapults. She certainly did not bring them. The outside world knew that the weapons of Jiang Pingji's army were always more powerful than those of the other feudal vassals. The most typical were the ballistae and catapults. Before the improvement, the ordinary ballistae could only hold one heavy bow, and its range was not far. After Jiang Pingji and the craftsmen under her command improved it, it could hold 6 heavy bows with a range of 600 steps. It was one of the best weapons to seriously injure the cavalry. Needless to say, the catapult was a good weapon for attacking cities. Without these weapons of war, Jiang Pingji's troops could only rely on manpower and the knives, spears, swords, and halberds in their hands. No matter how strong a person was, could he fight against 10 people alone? Even if one person could do it, could the whole army do it? Purely in terms of manpower, Yuan Xin and Jiang Pingji's side were not far apart. Including their own weapons of war, their overall chances of winning were high. Yuan Xin drew his sword and ordered all troops charge in order to conserve their strength. The marching speed was not fast. When the distance between the two armies became shorter and shorter, their speed suddenly increased. Thousands of cavalrymen took a detour to outflank them, while the remaining troops charged head-on to intercept and kill. The war drums on the chariots rumbled, and the beating drum beats pounded hard on the heart. Bang, bang, bang. Each beat was more rapid than the one before, and each beat was heavier than the one before. Their hearts felt as if they were about to jump into their throats and jump out of their throats. Jiang Pingji understood and smiled. Similarly, she drew out the god-slaying sword that had drunk countless blood. Beat the drums, meet the enemy. Yuan Xin laughed heartily. Look at that formation, it's scattered and disorderly. The person leading the troops must be a greenhorn. Jiang Pingji packed lightly and did not bring the heavy ballistae, but Yuan Xin had them. In ancient times, there was no concept of protecting intellectual property. Jiang Pingji used the ballistae and catapults to fight the Tsing-Yi army, laying a solid foundation for a future foundation. The other feudal vassal forces naturally had to find out clearly. Only by knowing oneself and one's enemy could one win 100 battles. It was not some advanced and complicated technology. Even if Jiang Pingji deliberately protected it, other forces could still steal and learn it. Speaking of the ballistae, the dozens of ballistae that Yuan Xin brought with him now were no less powerful than the ones that Jiang Pingji had once used. The arrows had a wooden shaft, an iron spearhead as the arrowhead, and an iron feather as the tail. They were shockingly powerful and had an extremely long range. When the arrows left the bowstring, they buzzed incessantly like the roar of the god of death. When they hit a person, the huge force could send them flying and pierce through several people's bodies. Seeing this, Yangtze hurriedly stopped Jiang Pingji. Chapter 1266. Yangtze was so scared that his face turned pale. He couldn't stop the willful and reckless lord by himself. Jiang Pingji looked at the situation on the battlefield coldly and said rather amusedly, "Do I look like the kind of person who rushes to die?" Yangtze secretly heaved a sigh of relief. He was mentally prepared for the lord to rush forward with Little White regardless of anything else. Yangtze was really not used to her suddenly being so obedient and docile. However, Jiang Pingji said, "I discovered something different when I pretended to be sick this time. Yangtze looked at her in confusion and began to mutter in his heart. What did the Lord learn from the incident of pretending to be sick? Was she so abnormal? In the past, she was indifferent when he tried to persuade her. Now that he was about to give up hope, she actually learned to be obedient. Jiang Pengji smiled and said nothing. It had been almost 10 years since she came to this era. On the surface, she seemed to adapt well, like an ordinary person from ancient times who had gone against the orthodoxy. But deep down, she was still the domineering commander of the Federal Regency. On the surface, she and the people around her were the same kind of people, but their essence was completely different. She had never felt that bloodline inheritance was very important. After all, reproduction had been replaced by machines, and continuing life had become extremely simple. As long as she was willing, she could have the inheritor with the best genes. However, this era was different. Bearing children was not only to satisfy the needs of the body, but also to continue life and will. Because Jiang Pengji had no children, when the news of her serious illness spread, everyone unanimously thought that the foundation she had built would be destroyed. Without children, there was no hope of continuing. Even if no one said it in front of her, she understood in her heart. Once she died, the people who had once attached themselves to her would be like rootless duckweed. When the tree falls, the monkeys scatter and they would be divided up by other forces in this chaotic world. This time, she was pretending to be sick so everyone could still face her calmly. Next time, if she was really seriously injured or critically ill, what would happen? Calculating the average lifespan of this era, the people around her were already middle-aged or old. They could not be frightened when they were old. So, she had to restrain herself a little and protect herself so that these little princesses would not be frightened to death. The power of dozens of ballistae was indeed terrifying. The livestream could not help but feel worried as it watched the soldiers continuously die under the ballistae. However, this was a war of 100,000 people. No matter how powerful dozens of ballistae were, there was no way to wipe out the other side. After a few dozen breaths, the vanguard troops of the two sides had already clashed together. On the battlefield, unless one reached Jiang Pengji's level, pure combat techniques would not be of much use. Teamwork was far more important than individual recklessness, and their survival rate was higher. Yangtze ordered his troops to put up a battle formation that was loose on the outside but tight on the inside, in order to mislead Yuan Xin. He wanted Yuan Xin to mistakenly think that they were fighting in a hurry and their battle formation was unstable, making them easy to defeat. Yuan Xin was indeed thinking this way. He was so pleased with himself that he lost some of his caution in commanding the battle. If a general was less cautious and dependable, it could be directly reflected on the battlefield. The performance of the soldiers was the most obvious. Niesun looked at the situation coldly. As if he had noticed something, his pale lips pursed tightly. Something was not right. The enemy's formations seemed to be loose, messy, and disorderly, but when the two armies clashed, the performance of the two armies was completely different. The troops under Yuan Xion's tent were extremely excited, and the originally tight formation began to show signs of loosening. On the other hand, the enemy's troops did not disperse when they charged, and the confrontation between the two armies was not messy either. It was obviously premeditated. Niesun watched for a while. His heart was beating like a drum, and an inexplicable panic struck his chest, making him palpitate uncomfortably. Quickly report to General Yuan Xian that the enemy is deceiving us. We must not be impulsive and reckless. Niesun asked the soldier to pass the message, but Yuan Xian did not take his words to heart at all. What right did a scholar, who only knew how to talk empty words, have to give orders on the battlefield? A strategist's responsibility was to come up with strategies. The main battlefield was the general's home ground. Niesun should not be a noisy guest and usurp the host. Tell military advisor Nye that I know what I'm doing. There's no need for him to worry too much. Just wait for the celebration banquet tonight. Yuan Xin responded casually. Moreover, how can a military order be changed so easily? The situation on the battlefield is ever-changing, and opportunities are fleeting. I can't listen to him completely. If Feng Jin had not secretly tricked Niesun and caused all of Niesun's schemes to fail, Yuan Xion's trust in him would not have fallen to rock bottom. When Niesun heard the soldier's reply, his chest thumped harder and harder. The frequency was also frighteningly high. However, Yuan Xion was the main general. Although Niesun had military power, he could not keep Yuan Xion in check. Yuan Xion was unwilling to listen, and he could not press his head to make him obey. Obstinate and self-opinionated, Niesun was so angry that the veins on his forehead were bulging. He gritted his teeth and said, "Such a boorish man will not have a good end." His voice was very soft. The surrounding shouts were like thunder, but no one heard him. Jiang Pingji pointed at the battlefield and said, "Jing Rong, look at them. Don't they look like black sesame porridge?" Yang Si was speechless. What porridge? His lord paid attention to the situation on the battlefield and gave orders. The messengers who received orders and waved the battle flags, and the soldiers who beat the drums also changed the rhythm of the drums. The generals and soldiers who were fighting at the front heard the movement and understood it. On one hand, they let the enemy rush in, and on the other, they closed the gap in the front line. Others closed the door to beat the dogs, but Jiang Pengji closed the door to kill. She smiled and said, "Our soldiers' battle formation is tight, like a thick black sesame porridge that cannot be poured out." The enemy's formations seemed to be strict, but they had overexerted themselves and were eager for quick success. After several exchanges of attacks, the formation has become more and more loose, which is just the right time to thin them out. Encircle them and break them one by one. Yang Si glanced at the battlefield. From time to time, blood would soar into the sky, heads would fly everywhere, and the ground would be covered with broken limbs and bones. He said in a pleading tone, "My lord, can we change the analogy?" Yang Si also liked to drink black sesame porridge. The doctor said that drinking more black sesame could slow down aging and reduce white hair. However, his lord seemed to be going against him. She deliberately used black sesame porridge as a metaphor for the dense mass of heads on the battlefield, which made Yang Si lose all his appetite. Jiang Pingji asked, "Not my image?" Yang Si's face was cold. "The image is perfect." It successfully made Yang Si feel disgusted with the black sesame porridge. He felt that in the future, whenever he saw the black sesame porridge, he would subconsciously think of the human heads crowding around it. Although the metaphor was a little disgusting, Jiang Pengji was right. What effect would individual heroism have on a battlefield of 100,000 soldiers? Like a drop of water flowing into the ocean. Only their tacit cooperation and imposing manner could allow them to win this battle. Combine. Jiang Pengji gave another order. Attack. The messenger who passed the order made a signal, and the rhythm of the war drums changed again. It was as rapid as a rainstorm. The shield soldiers at the front line tightened their defensive line according to the order. While they killed the enemy, they combined their shields into 2 rows, which were at least 10 feet tall. Chapter 1267. The troops under Jiang Pengji's tent became a meat grinder. They first divided the enemy into countless smaller pieces, then contracted the battle line to mince them into pieces. The quality of Yuan Xion's troops was far inferior to the elite troops trained by Jiang Pengji for many years. The difference between the two sides did not lie in their individual physique, but in the speed and extent of their execution of military orders. Yang Si ordered them to assume a battle formation that was loose on the outside but tight on the inside. They could obediently do as they were told, luring the enemy to let down their guard and send the army to charge. When the two armies charged at the same time, Jiang Pengji's troops could still take care of their comrades in formation, but Yuan Xion's troops paled in comparison. When the two armies clashed, the difference between the two would be magnified again and again. Just like Jiang Pengji's metaphor, on one side was thick porridge that could not be poured down by chopsticks, sticky and solidified, while on the other side was thin porridge with a high moisture content. When thick porridge and thin porridge collided, the thin porridge would naturally be the first to scatter. Jiang Pengji ordered the frontline troops to let the enemy rush into their formation, so they could faithfully execute military orders. When the time was ripe, Jiang Pengji ordered the frontline troops to tighten their defense line, and they also obeyed the order. Strong execution would bring about extremely high efficiency. The battlefield was a place that was ever-changing. Being one step ahead of the enemy meant gaining the upper hand. Jiang Pengji led Yuan Xin and the others by their noses, so they had no choice but to follow her rhythm until they were utterly defeated. In this wave, Jiang Pengji had at least encircled the 5,000 troops under Yuan Xin's command into her territory. Attack! The 5,000 troops were just a small group of people to Jiang Pengji's 50,000 troops. When they were scattered into their formation, they were like a grain of sand mixed into the desert, small and helpless. Coincidentally, at this moment, Jiang Pengji gave the order to encircle and kill. The generals and soldiers who were beating the drums shouted in unison. Snow-white blades and spearheads pierced through from all directions, directly turning the scattered enemy troops into bloody hedgehogs. The rhythm of the generals and soldiers who were beating the drums slowed down, but the strength of the drums did not decrease. Hundreds of drums were played in unison, and the sound resounded throughout the entire battlefield. The momentum alone suppressed the opposite side. The battlefield changed so quickly that it only took a few dozen breaths from beginning to end. Yuan Xin discovered Jiang Pengji's intention to encroach on the enemy. He immediately ordered the soldiers to fight and retreat while defending against the enemy. Unfortunately, their execution was not good enough. When Yuan Xin's order was given, before the soldiers could react, they were surrounded by the enemy. Making dumplings in one go would leave thousands of corpses on the ground. It was almost impossible for these people to survive. Not to mention surviving, being able to leave an intact corpse in a chaotic battle was already a stroke of luck. The gravel and stones on the ground were dyed dark red by the blood. The blood, which looked like little red snakes, gathered on the ground and formed small puddles. Seeing this, Yuan Xin angrily punched the horse's back, causing it to let out a mournful neigh. His eyes were red, and he pulled the reins tightly with one hand, forcing the war horse to calm down. General Yuan Xin, it's obvious that the enemy has come prepared. Why don't we retreat first to preserve our military strength? The two armies had only clashed for a quarter of an hour, but they had already lost thousands of soldiers and horses. Their morale had plummeted, while the enemy's losses were minimal. Continuing to fight like this would only increase the number of casualties. If Yuan Xin had been more cautious and conservative in the beginning, he might not have faced such a difficult situation. Hearing Nie Sun's words, Yuan Xin's eyes turned bloodshot and murderous, causing Nie Sun's heart to tremble. The army hasn't been defeated, and the soldiers still have their combat strength. Military counselors' words shake the morale of the army. Isn't this killing intent? Yuan Xin lowered his head and glanced at the sword in his hand. He almost couldn't suppress the wild and wanton murderous intent in his heart. Nie Sun said, although the enemy has many men and horses, they have very little military supplies and rations. An army of 50,000 will consume countless rations in 3 to 5 days, not to mention 1 or 2 months. Our army doesn't need to face them head-on. We only need to surround and harass them to break their evil plan of using war to sustain war. Nie Sun's method was naturally vicious. If he used it to deal with Jiang Pengji, she would really fall. In order not to delay their speed and mobility, the army's rations could only last for 3 to 5 days. If Nie Sun used rogue tactics to harass her and plunder her rations, Jiang Pengji's side couldn't afford to drag it out. Just as Nie Sun predicted, Jiang Pengji wasn't afraid of a head-on confrontation. She was afraid of the enemy's endless harassment and encirclement. Yuan Xin refused to listen. He was an extremely arrogant and self-opinionated person. He had developed a prejudice against Nie Sun, and this prejudice would always exist. It wouldn't disappear with time. Nie Sun jumped out to stop him at this moment. Yuan Xin was furious. A white light streaked across the sky. Nia's son was blinded by the light. He subconsciously raised his hand and turned his body to avoid the blade that was aimed at his neck. However, the blade still fell on his shoulder and chest. Intense pain spread from his body to his entire body. It was so painful that his muscles twitched and trembled. Niasun's world was instantly dyed with blood. The blood that gushed out from his wound spilled a long trail on the ground. A few deputy generals witnessed everything. They were so shocked that their limbs turned cold. They watched Niasun's body go limp and fall to the ground. The fresh blood converged into a pool of blood on the ground beneath him. After everyone saw it, they felt as if they had fallen into an ice cellar. Yuan Xian was actually so arrogant. Niasun was Huang Song's strategist. No matter what mistakes he made, he should be dealt with by Huang Song. What right did Yuan Xian have to wield his sword against Niasun? Was he so fearless just because he was the elder of the Lord's clan? Drag him away. This person shakes the morale of the army. He has evil intentions. Kill him as a warning to others. After the impulse, Yuan Xian felt a trace of regret in his heart. However, it was quickly drowned out by anger. Yuan Xian's words lacked confidence. However, there was no turning back. Since he had already been slashed, how could he apologize? The deputy general stepped forward and said, "General, strategist Nia is the Lord's trusted aide. If you kill him before the battle, it will not be good for you." It seemed like he was speaking for Yuan Xian, but he was actually pleading for Niasun. Although the wound was deep, it was not fatal. If the bleeding was stopped in time, he could still keep his life. Yuan Xian valued himself more. If Niasun really died, it would indeed be troublesome. His tones softened a little. Drag him away, and keep an eye on him. The deputy general was afraid that he would go back on his word. He quickly said, "Yes, sir." Niasun's wound was very long and deep. The bleeding was also very impressive. It had only been a short while, but his clothes were already soaked. The soldier who was supporting him raised his hand and wiped the warm blood on his hand. Niasun's face was very fair. Even though he had grown a short beard to make himself look more mature, it still could not hide his gentleness. Because he had lost too much blood, his originally fair complexion had turned pale. His lips had also darkened. Faced with such a large wound and loss of blood, the military doctor was also in a difficult position. In the end, he could only take a risk out of desperation. I heard that the military doctors under Lu Shi's tent are very good at suturing wounds. Why don't we try using this to stop the bleeding? When Huang Song and Su Bei formed an alliance, they ambushed Hu County, which was guarded by Qiguan Rang, and stole a cart of medical supplies. With this cart of supplies and the retired military doctors he had secretly bribed, Huang Song's side also copied Jiang Pengji's logistical medical methods. However, Huang Song's side lacked experience and did not learn well. In the end, there were not many military doctors who knew how to suture. Niasun's wound was so large that he would die if he did not suture it. It was better to treat a dead horse as a living one. With the help of hemostatic powder, he might be able to keep his life. Chapter 1268. From afar, Jiang Pengji could not see what was happening at the enemy's rear. She did not know that Niasun was struggling between life and death. Niasun was struggling for his life at the back, and the soldiers at the front were also fighting with their lives on the line. At every moment, there were people dying in foreign lands. Vigor was something that could only be built up in one go, then weakened by the second, and exhausted by the third. Once it went downhill, it would be very difficult for it to rise again. Jiang Pengji had tricked Yuan Xian the moment they met face to face. She had defeated 5,000 of his troops and horses. She had slapped down their morale. She tightened her grip on the hilt of the god-slaying saber, like a person who was addicted to smoking, trying her best to resist the urge to leave the scene. Yang Si, who was on the side, saw that she was trying hard to endure. Her pitiful appearance made him unable to harden his heart. He was full of persuasion, but he only sighed. "If you don't mind, why don't you let Si do it for you? Look, it's rare to see such an understanding strategist like him." He's so considerate of the Lord. Bullying such a cute little angel. Doesn't the Lord's conscience hurt? Jiang Pengji's eyes lit up. She wanted to grab Yang Xixiang and bite her. This guy was too good. Yang Xi, he didn't dare to let the Lord take a whiff. Firstly, being kissed by the Lord made him feel like being kissed by a man. Secondly, he was afraid that the Lord would calm down and take revenge. Thirdly, he was afraid that if this matter were to spread to Wei Xi's ears, it would provoke the revenge of the jealous beauty. He couldn't afford to provoke him. Jiang Pengji tightened her grip on Little White's reins. Little White seemed to understand Jiang Pengji's intentions, and its fighting spirit was high. Go, Little White! Jiang Pengji tightened her grip on the reins and clamped the horse's belly. Little White swiftly ran from the army's flank to the front line. Before Yang Xi could say anything, he saw Little White kicking up a cloud of dust along the way. One person and one horse had already left. Sigh, I'm destined to have gray hair when I meet such a master. I should drink more black sesame porridge, because the scales of victory and defeat on the battlefield had tilted in their favor, and the situation of the battle was becoming more and more favorable. Yang Xi allowed Jiang Pengji to have a go. Fairy Queen Scarlet, Ren Gallop, get on the horse. Husky attack. Sankei, you guys are so evil. Can't you let me watch the live stream? Under your violent brainwashing, my mind is now filled with images of a husky riding on Little White, swinging the god-slaying sword and killing people. The host is so handsome and charming. Magical things were more memorable than serious things. When many idol audiences thought of Jiang Pengji, the first thing that came to their minds was not her beautiful face and careless smile, but a husky in red and silver armor with its tongue hanging out. Fortunately, Jiang Pengji had blocked the bullet screen in the streaming room. If she accidentally saw the bullet screen, she would definitely perform poorly. Yang Xi's commanding style was different from Jiang Pengji's. The latter used overt schemes, while the former liked to backstab people. Sinister and crafty, always giving people the illusion of being entangled by a cold and venomous snake. Jiang Nongqin, who was killing the enemies at the front line, was the first to realize that the commander had changed. As expected, the person in charge now should be Yang Xi, right? This is so uncomfortable. Jiang Nongqin had learned from Jiang Pengji. She also liked the style of fighting in a big way. If it was Yang Xi, she would always feel uncomfortable all over. Only by killing a few more enemies could she feel better. Jiang Nongqin shook off the fresh blood on the blade. Her face was filled with sternness. Where's the Lord? Jiang Nongqin urged her horse to retreat to the rear. She turned her head to look for Jiang Pengji, but she did not see the familiar figure. Of course, she could not see it because Jiang Pengji was too far away from her. She really can't withstand a single blow. Jiang Pengji felt the blood in her whole body boiling. The horrifying blood in the eyes of the audience was a drug that stimulated her nerves. She galloped along the way, killed people along the way, and left the corpses of the enemies behind. City of Illusion. Kill one person in 10 steps. Leave no trace for 1,000 miles. But the streamer killed 10 people in 1 step, and they all died with grievances. The former was the unrestrained heroism of a swordsman, while the latter was the blood debt of a butcher. They could not accuse Jiang Pengji of being ruthless. Similarly, they could not say that the death of the enemy soldiers served them right. Who was the murderer? This was the way of the world. The idle fish who were watching the show entertained themselves, while some of the more reserved ones turned around leisurely and continued to watch from the sidelines. Jiang Pengji's gaze seemed to penetrate the heavy wall of people and see the general of the enemy. To shoot a person, first shoot the horse. To capture the bandits, first capture the king. If she could take the head of the enemy general from among the tens of thousands of troops, Jiang Pengji was tempted. But before she could put it into action, she unhappily put down this tempting challenge. Forget it. A group of middle-aged and old princesses was more important. Even so, Jiang Pengji still killed whoever stood in her way. Under the god-slaying sword, there would be no complete corpse. Jiang Pengji's side was like a hot knife through butter. Yuan Xian's side became more and more dispirited as the battle went on. Their morale dropped to a certain level, and the soldiers did not have the courage to continue fighting. Yuan Xian saw that the battle situation could not be salvaged. In the end, he could only spit angrily and unwillingly order a retreat. He thought that this group of enemies would be easy to take down. Who knew that after taking 2 bites, he realized that they were not bones made of meat, but bones made of steel. If he really bit down, he was sure that his teeth would break. Jiang Pengji chased after them for a while and won the award of the best player in the match. In the end, she unwillingly brought her men back. She knew very well that the disadvantage of the army was too obvious. Not to mention chasing after the enemy, they could not even delay them for a long time. Pack up the supplies they left behind. Reward the army well and take care of the wounded. The soldiers have worked hard today. Jiang Pengji raised her hand to wipe the blood off her face. She casually tore off a piece of clothing from a corpse and wiped the body of the god, slaying sword carelessly. Yang Si also said, "My lord, let's rest for a day and leave this place tomorrow." Yuan Xian suffered a great loss today. He will certainly not let it go. Yuan Xian was fighting on his home ground, so the logistics and food supply line could be guaranteed. However, this was not the case for Jiang Pengji's side. She could only use the battle to sustain the battle. If it was 3,000 to 5,000 soldiers and horses, it would naturally not be strenuous, but the pressure of 50,000 soldiers and horses was too great. They even had to count their food and did not dare to act recklessly. Jiang Pengji said, "I think so too. I'm not afraid of anything else, but I'm afraid that Nie Sun will give Yuan Xian the idea of strengthening the defense and clearing the field." What was strengthening the defense and clearing the field? Naturally, it was not laying out a carpet, as the salted fish said. This was a method that was specially used to deal with the invasion of a strong enemy and to sustain the battle through the battle. Fortifying the defense and clearing the field would make the enemy unable to attack the stronghold and seize the supplies and food. Jiang Pengji did not need to attack the city now, but she wanted to seize the supplies and supplies. If Yuan Xian listened to Nie Sun's advice and decided to strengthen the defense and clear the field, Jiang Pengji and the others would have to starve. Once the 50,000 soldiers ran out of food, they would not be able to hold on for 10 to 15 days, but 4 to 5 days. The worst-case scenario would be to kill the war horses to fill their stomachs. Speaking of this, Jiang Pengji reminded him, "Also, get someone to count the enemy's war horses. Continue using the ones that can be used. Slaughter the ones that can't be used and add a plate of meat." Yang Si said, "What about the corpses of the fallen soldiers?" Jiang Pengji rolled her eyes at him. "You still want to eat people?" Yang Si was speechless. "Who the F***CK wants to eat people?" Jiang Pengji said, "Burn the corpses of our soldiers and place them in an urn with their clothes and bring them back. The enemy's corpses will be directly burned by the river." After many wars, in order to make it easier to clean up the battlefield, the corpses were directly thrown into the river. In the most tragic cases, the lower part of the river could even be blocked and the whole river would be dyed bright red. If doing so saved trouble, Jiang Pengji did not mind doing so. However, she was very clear that the rotting corpses would contaminate the river and even cause a large-scale epidemic to break out in the villages near the river. Chapter 1269. Get out. Yuan Xian suffered such a big loss in Jiang Pengji's hands and lost tens of thousands of troops. How could he not be angry? He couldn't control his stubbornness. He urgently needed a way to vent his anger. Destroying the main tent was the only choice. The deputy generals in the tent didn't dare to go against Yuan Xian. He even killed Huang San's confidant, Nie Sun, without hesitation, not to mention the others. The deputy generals exchanged glances with each other and retreated resentfully. They didn't want to be swept by the tail of the storm. Everyone filed out. Looking at the empty commander's tent, Yuan Xian panted heavily, his eyes bloodshot. Yuan Xian couldn't escape the blame for this defeat, but he didn't want to admit it or accept it was his fault. Victory and defeat were common in war. He would definitely kill the enemy next time. He was depressed and drank the whole night until he was dead drunk. At the same time, Nie Sun, who had experienced a life and death struggle, finally opened his sleepy and confused eyes. The military counselor is awake? The military counselor is really awake. The military doctor who was taking care of him noticed that Nie Sun's eyelashes were trembling. He was excited. This was a sign that he was about to wake up. If he didn't wake up, the military doctor who was in charge of stitching up the wound would be in despair. He was afraid of being responsible for Nie Sun's death. Now, not only did Nie Sun not die, but he also woke up successfully. Not only did he not make a mistake, but he also made a contribution. The road to Qingyun was right under his feet. Military counselor, do you feel uncomfortable now? Are you hungry? Are you thirsty? Do you want some porridge to fill your stomach? The military doctor was moved to tears. Nie Sun was definitely the most stressed patient he had taken over. He was unconscious for 3 days and 3 nights. During this period, he had a high fever and his wound was red and festering. They all thought that Nie Sun couldn't make it through this and wanted to prepare for his funeral. They didn't expect Nie Sun to have such a strong desire to live despite looking weak. He managed to make it through the most dangerous stage. Nie Sun's face was pale. His lips were cracked due to the lack of moisture. His eyes were dazed and unfocused, as if he hadn't regained his consciousness. The military doctor could only suppress his excitement. He looked at Nie Sun's mouth eagerly, expecting him to say something. If Nie Sun's mind was clear, it meant that he was temporarily out of danger. If his mind was still muddled, it meant that he was still in danger. The military doctor tried to call out a few more times, and Nie Sun finally gave him a little reaction, his eyeballs turning in his direction. Nie Sun felt like he had just had a terrible nightmare. He groped his way forward in the dark, and there was something that he couldn't see clearly chasing after him. He didn't know what it was, but he had a faint premonition that it was extremely dangerous and couldn't be caught. He could only keep running forward, but the footsteps behind him were getting closer and closer. Just as he was about to lose all hope, he heard a cry coming from afar, as if it was guiding him. The girl's cries were indistinct at first, and then that was the cry of a baby girl. She cried for a very long time, and from time to time, she would even break into sobs. Nie Sun's heart ached for no reason. Ignoring the thing chasing after him, he ran toward the source of the baby girl's cry. If there really was a child in this dark place, how desperate would it be? Nie Sun didn't know what he was thinking at that time, but he followed that direction as if he was possessed. He didn't know how long he had been walking, but a dazzling white light suddenly bloomed in front of him, and the surrounding darkness was completely dispelled. At the end of the light stood a graceful woman. She was wearing a peach-pink dress and a red blouse over her head. She was coaxing something with her head lowered. Nie Sun focused his eyes and realized that there was an infant in the woman's arms. The woman also noticed his existence and turned around to call out to him. Chongyun, Chongyun? Nie Sun was shocked, and his eyes suddenly widened. Memories flooded into his mind like a tide, and he was forcibly awakened by the pain. When he woke up, Nie Sun was muddle-headed and didn't know where he was. It wasn't until the dazzling candlelight made his eyes water that he gradually came back to his senses. Military counselor? Military counselor? The military doctor was still calling out persistently. If he wasn't afraid of offending Nie Sun, he really wanted to call out his full name. It was said that calling out like this could bring back the soul of a lost person. Nie Sun forcefully blinked his sore and watery eyes and opened his mouth with difficulty. Water, water. He had been unconscious for 3 days and 3 nights. Other than the medicine that the military doctor had forced into his stomach, there were only 2 small bowls of porridge. He was thirsty and hungry. The military doctor hurriedly asked someone to bring warm water and carefully fed Nie Sun half a bowl. However, Nie Sun's body was weak and it was difficult for him to swallow. Most of the water was wasted. After drinking the water, Nie Sun couldn't resist the exhaustion of his body and fell into a deep sleep again. When he woke up for the second time, it was already 6 hours later. Nye-sun was much more clear-headed. He asked for half a bowl of porridge from the soldier who was taking care of him, and his cold limbs were slowly filled with a warm itch. When he regained consciousness, Nye-sun lay motionless on the simple bed, staring at the top of the tent. At this moment, a deputy general ran over to look at Nye-sun out of guilt. Nye-sun had already gathered some strength. He asked the deputy general, "How's the battle situation?" Before he fell unconscious from his heavy injuries, the battle situation was already extremely disadvantageous. If Yuan Xin could retreat in time, the losses wouldn't be too great. The deputy general's expression was solemn as he stammered. "Our army suffered a great defeat. We lost more than 11,000 soldiers and lost 30% of our supplies." When Nye-sun heard this, he closed his eyes calmly. The deputy general said, military advisor, this general has a bold idea. Why don't military advisor secretly send a letter to the Lord and quietly dismiss General Yuan Xin? General Yuan Xin is not worthy of being a general. We can't just let go of the military advisor's suffering this time. Nye-sun closed his eyes and thought for a long time, so long that the deputy general thought he had fainted again. Changing generals at the last minute is a taboo for military strategists. Nye-sun said indifferently, "Moreover, I'm afraid I won't be able to live for long." The deputy general was shocked and looked at the military doctor in disbelief. The military doctor nodded his head awkwardly. He said, "The military advisor's wounds are too deep. Although the vital organs weren't injured, he has lost too much blood and the wounds are red and festering. If he wants to completely get out of danger, it will depend on his recovery in the next half a month. If he's not careful, he'll..." Nye-sun had survived the most difficult hurdle, but this didn't mean that his life was safe. There was a lack of supplies during the march, and the environment for recuperation was not peaceful. All these factors were disadvantageous to Nye-sun. Before the wounds completely healed, they couldn't let their guard down. If the wounds suddenly reopened or bad luck invaded, Nye-sun's life would be lost here. According to the military doctor's many years of experience as a doctor, the chances of Nye-sun surviving were less than 5%. The deputy general frowned in distress. After a while, he sighed angrily. He wanted to drag Yuan Xin out and whip him. Without Nye-sun to handle military affairs, the army was in chaos. Yuan Xin was a boorish man who only knew how to train and fight. What was this? Chapter 1270. The deputy general's heart ached when he heard this. Their military advisor was too kind-hearted. If only he had secretly killed Yuan Xin, that boorish fellow, long ago. Nye-sun said, "I still have something on my mind." The deputy general said, "Military counselor, please say it." Nye-sun said, "Do you know how to read?" The deputy general said, "I only know a few words. I don't dare to show off in front of the military counselor." Nye-sun's breathing quickened, and his eyes became more and more tired. He forced himself to say, "Help me prepare a brush and ink and write a letter to my wife and daughter. Yuan Xin is narrow-minded and holds grudges. If I'm gone, there will only be an orphan and a widow left at home. I'm afraid they will be bullied. Even if the Lord takes pity on them and is willing to take care of them, there are many troubles at the widow's door. He can't take care of them forever. Although the Lord will take care of the widow of his subjects, it can't be compared to blood relatives." Nye-sun said desolately, "Are you willing to write a letter for me? I want my wife to bring my daughter to the Yu family. The Yu family is a famous family in Dongqing, and they only have one daughter. If my wife has two elders to take care of her, I can die in peace." The deputy general said, "I'm willing." Nye-sun revealed a light smile of relief. "Thank you." The deputy general looked at him, and the 7-foot-tall man couldn't help but be envious. He asked someone to prepare a blank scroll and brush. Nye-sun couldn't take it anymore and fell into a deep sleep. He woke him up an hour later. Nye-sun dictated, and the deputy general wrote, "I have a private seal in my bosom. My wife will know the authenticity of the letter by stamping it. The private seal was like an identity card to the people of this era. It was unique and recognizable. Nies-sun had a few seals. Some were used for official business, and some were used for personal relationships. Only the one in his bosom was carved by him and his wife, Zhu Qingning. One was written in yin and the other in yang. Each had a mandarin duck and the nickname they gave each other. This kind of private item would usually not be exposed in front of others. The deputy general took out the private seal and carefully stamped it at the end of the scroll. Seeing the private seal, the deputy general was secretly shocked at the relationship between Nies-sun and his wife. Nies-sun had used up all his energy and he had a low fever. He couldn't resist the drowsiness and fell asleep again. The army couldn't privately send documents to the outside world. Otherwise, they would be suspected of betrayal. They had to go through the official channels. Nies-sun used to handle this kind of thing, but now he was about to kneel, so the letter naturally fell into Yuan Xian's hands. The letter was very normal and short. Nies-sun told his wife that if anything happened to him, there was no need for her to wait for him. She could just marry herself. Because his situation was not very good, he was worried that his wife and daughter would not have anyone to take care of them. So he hoped that they would go to the Yu clan. Nies-sun's family? Who is Yu's Nies-sun's family? Yuan Xian stared at the letter and thought for a while. He finally remembered that Nies-sun's in-laws were Master Yuan Jing, a famous scholar in Dongqing. To the Du Xing, Yuan said. Yuan's words. Although Master Yuan Jing had not publicly surrendered to Jiang Pengji, everyone knew that Master Yuan Jing had been a teacher in Wanzhou for many years. Even though he didn't surrender to Jiang Pengji, everyone knows he's been a teacher in Wanzhou for many years. If Zhu Qingning takes his daughter to the Yu family, won't he be going to Jiang Pengji? Moreover, if Nies-sun really died, would his master mistreat this orphan and widow? Was there a need for them to seek shelter from the Yu clan? However, Nies-sun's request was reasonable, and he was heavily injured by Yuan Xian, so Yuan Xian couldn't reject him directly, in case he was criticized for being heartless. Yuan Xian asked the deputy general, "How is the counselor's condition? Nies-sun is still lying in the gates of hell." Yuan Xian didn't believe him. He called the military doctor over. The military doctor explained in detail, but the content was similar. Yuan Xian didn't believe it, so he called the military doctor over. The military doctor explained in detail, but the content was more or less the same. Yuan Xian didn't believe him. He called the military doctor over. The military doctor told him in detail, but the content was similar. First of all, this letter could not pass through the hands of the Lord, Huang Song. Otherwise, the Lord would know that he was the one who injured Nies-sun in front of the battle and would definitely remove him from his position and capture him. Next, Nies-sun was about to die. His survival rate was very low. Yuan Xian couldn't keep his will. After thinking about it, Yuan Xian still approved the letter. Send a horse to deliver the letter to the wife of the military counselor. Nies-sun's wife, Zhu Qingning, was in Heda County in Haozhou. Heda County was not far from here. It would take 5 or 6 days to get there. Nies-sun's condition had been worsening. He didn't wake up for long. Sometimes he was delirious from the fever. Yuan Xian also sneaked a peek. Nies-sun's original appearance was stunning. The cinnabar between his eyebrows enhanced his looks. 90% of the women in the world would be ashamed of their looks. Only Wei Ci could compete with Nies-sun in this aspect. Her appearance was leisurely and unparalleled. She would be too long if she was a bit more, and too short if she was a bit less. Her eyebrows were like green feathers, and her skin was as white as snow. Now, his skin was dark yellow, and he looked haggard. His body was thinner, and he looked like a bag of bones. His breathing was weak and intermittent. It was as if a soul reaper was crouching beside him, waiting for him to die. At the thought of this, Yuan Xian felt the temperature in the tent turn cold. He left after saying, "Take care of the military counselor." Seeing this, the military doctor let out a long sigh. After Yuan Xian left and the military doctor went out to get medicine, Nies-sun opened his eyes weakly. There was an unfathomable depth in his eyes. The The corners of his mouth curled up into a mysterious smile. Zhu Qingning had been feeling anxious for a while. Her daughter cried for the whole night. Her face was red, and she was crying so hard that she was almost out of breath. She had no choice but to seek medical advice. She even invited a few mistresses who helped exorcise evil spirits to come to the mansion to check the feng shui. The mistress couldn't figure out the reason and could only say vaguely, "There's chaos outside. There are countless resentful spirits. The little lady is still young. She hasn't formed her skull yet. Her soul is easily infected by evil spirits. She might have bumped into something. Why don't you let me cast a spell and try?" Zhu Qingning didn't believe this at first, but her daughter had been crying for a few days. She couldn't figure out the reason and could only believe the mistress. After the spell, the mistress gave Zhu Qingning a few yellow talismans that could cure children's crying at night. After Zhu Qingning put them on the child, she hung them around her daughter's room. Unexpectedly, the yellow talismans were really effective. That night, the crying quieted down. Her daughter cried for a while before she was coaxed to sleep. Zhu Qingning immediately prepared a lot of gold and silver for this mistress. Although this mistress wasn't a swindler, she wasn't that magical either. She wasn't sure herself and was prepared to run away. Unexpectedly, Zhu Qingning sent someone to give her a generous reward the next day. The mistress was so happy that she could see her teeth, but not her eyes. She simply took all the credit. A few days later, a letter from home from the front lines was delivered to the mansion. After reading it, Zhu Qingning's face turned pale and she burst into tears. After crying, she regained her senses and immediately sent people to pack up their belongings and important items. She also prepared enough guards and horses to go north. Because Lady Qi wasn't in Huda County, no one stopped Zhu Qingning's big move. More than 100 guards escorted the mother and daughter and a lot of their belongings north. As long as they avoided the front lines, the journey was still very safe. Zhu Qingning grabbed the letter and flipped it over. She vaguely understood the real reason why her daughter had been crying nonstop a few days ago. Chapter 1271. Who did you say was slashed? Jiang Pingji ate and drank the spicy food happily. Although the conditions of the march were harsh, she still tried her best to live a better life. She was just enjoying her food, but she didn't expect Yang Si to reveal such a big news for her. Yang Si didn't frown. He was used to his lord's behavior, which was more boorish than a man's. Sometimes, he even forgot her gender. He repeated, "Our informant sent news that Nie Sun was slashed by Yuan Xan. His life is in danger." Jiang Pengji clapped her hands and said with a smile, "They're biting each other. They haven't won the war, and they're already fighting among themselves?" Yang Si secretly rolled his eyes. No matter what, Nie Sun was her cousin. She didn't have to gloat so obviously, right? Jiang Pengji coughed and said seriously, "Why was Nie Sun slashed by Yuan Xan? And he almost lost his life?" Yang Si said, "I heard that they had a disagreement before the battle. Yuan Xian flew into a rage out of humiliation and slashed him. According to their understanding, Yuan Xian was a 100% boorish man. He had a lot of experience in war, but he was impatient and arrogant. In Jiang Pingji's opinion, such a guy could only be a vanguard general who charged and broke through enemy lines. He couldn't be a commander who commanded the army. If it were her, she would never let Yuan Xian have any command. Even if she had to do so, she would arrange for people who could suppress Yuan Xian. Obviously, he and Nie Sun had different opinions. Yuan Xian was definitely stupid. If Nie Sun died, he would really die unjustly. Nie Sun wasn't enough to suppress Yuan Xian. Instead, he angered Yuan Xian and was killed. Wasn't that unjustly? Jiang Pengji always said whatever was on her mind. Her straightforward temperament made people love and hate her at the same time. Nie Sun is really pitiful. He is such an idiot. As his cousin, I definitely sympathize with him. As his enemy, I feel that I can secretly laugh when I lie in bed at night." Yang Si was speechless. He looked around and found that there was indeed no one around. Then he breathed a sigh of relief. Yang Si didn't want this idle conversation to be written into unofficial history. If Nie Sun saw it, he would be so angry that he would die. Most importantly, it was very embarrassing. Nie Sun's life and death are unknown. This is indeed beneficial to our army. Yang Si stroked his beard and said, Yuan Xian is nothing to worry about. Jiang Pengji smiled and said, I didn't treat this person as an opponent. He lowered my status. Yang Si was puzzled. What do you mean by acting cool? His lord always had amazing words and strange words. Yang Si liked to listen to them and always felt that they were fresh and interesting. Jiang Pengji said, the so-called pretentiousness is the ability to show off. Yang Si was confused again. What's posturing? Jiang Pengji smiled and said, you pretend to be very powerful and let others think that you are powerful. In fact, it means very powerful. The viewers in the live stream also giggled as they provided detailed explanations. Jing Jia, Xiao Rongrong, do you see the streamer in front of you? Every time she unleashed her domineering aura, she was acting cool. Capricorn Storyman, I can't help but complain. The host is really a master of the essence of acting tough. Yang Si's expression twisted for a moment, and he couldn't help but tell the truth. This phrase is quite suitable for the Lord. Jiang Pengji was speechless. The inexplicable feeling of being ridiculed by one's own strategist hit the bullseye underscore. Smiley face. Angle, underscore way, Xiao Rongrong is really too cute. The power of that ridicule just now should be enough to blow up half of the Japanese pirates' island. Durian Gao, accurate, vivid, and ruthless. You hit the target with one strike. Xiao Rongrong has already seen the threshold of the holy temple of ridicule. Jiang Pengji coughed awkwardly and changed the topic stiffly. The news that Nie Sun is seriously ill and dying has been confirmed. Just Yuan Xian alone isn't scary. We can still continue to stir up trouble. It would be best to stir up the entire Qinzhou and delay the situation at the rear to distract Huangsong at the front line. Yang Si said faintly, My lord, you still have to be careful. You can't expose your identity. After all, Jiang Pengji was still a patient. Her condition was not much better than Nie Sun's. Although she was reckless, she still had to keep up her disguise. Jiang Pengji pouted uninterestedly. Why did Yang Si always like to make things difficult for her? Yusu Ajo, if I don't make things difficult for you, then I'm sorry for the delicacies that were snatched away by the host. Jiang Pengji, whether it was God's will or something else, Yuan Xian, who had lost Nie Sun, was not as stupid as the two of them had expected. The first few days were smooth sailing, but then they encountered obstacles. Jiang Pengji was the first to discover that something was wrong. Yesterday, when she led the troops to sweep through the area, they could get a lot of food, but the food they found today was much less than expected. This should be an important town. Why isn't there much food stored in the warehouse? It seemed that more than half of the food had been moved away overnight. The ones that had not been moved away were probably because there was not enough manpower. Yang Si said, We'll know once we catch the person in charge and ask him. They caught the person in charge of the granary, but he still refused to answer. They used some methods to extort a confession from him, and he confessed everything. The food stored in the granary in the nearby important town has long been moved away. Jiang Pengji raised her eyebrows and asked, When did this happen? The person in charge answered shakily, 3 days ago. Jiang Pengji sneered and played with the whip in her hand. The whip was like a snake with eyes. It whipped the ground from time to time, making a crisp sound. The person in charge was horrified to see that the long whip had left a few deep marks on the green brick ground. Which direction did they go? The person in charge resisted the urge to pee in his lower abdomen. He was drenched in cold sweat as he said, They went southwest. Jiang Pengji looked at his face coldly for a long time. She raised her hand and waved. 2 strong soldiers came forward and pressed him down. Is it possible that Nie Sun is not critically ill? Yang Si was puzzled. Yuan Xian really doesn't seem like a person with such a brain and reaction speed. Yuan Xian was an old general with rich combat experience, but he was too conceited. To put it bluntly, he was a straightforward person who did not know how to be flexible. To deal with Jiang Pengji's rogue tactic of using war to sustain war, fortifying the defense, and clearing the field was the most conservative and the smartest way. It also had the smallest loss. Yuan Xian did not think of this. Instead, he chose to lead the troops to fight Jiang Pengji head-on. In the end, he was beaten by her until he covered his head and fled like a rat. Now, he reacted and wanted to cut off her food supply. Jiang Pengji asked, "How many days do we have left of our army's provisions?" Yang Si replied, "The military supplies that Yuan Xian's army left behind previously, plus the harvest from these days, should be able to last for another 10 days. After 10 days, the situation would not be optimistic." Yang Si could not figure out what had happened to Yuan Xian. Was Yuan Xian out of his mind, or was there someone guiding him? If it was the former, there was no need to worry. If it was the latter, they had to find a way to slip away as soon as possible. Jiang Pengji said, "Fight and retreat at the same time. Be prepared for both scenarios." She was not a greedy person. She also knew when to stop. It was important to destroy the enemy, but the soldiers in her army were not cabbages. They could not increase the meaningless consumption. Chapter 1272. Jiang Pengji had many shortcomings, but she also had many advantages. The most obvious one was that she was straightforward and decisive. It was clear that their side had an absolute advantage, and they were about to turn the enemy's lair upside down. Under the urge of greed and fluke mentality, most generals would inevitably be indecisive and hesitant. However, Jiang Pengji was not like that. She had always been straightforward about victory and defeat. Because she was too straightforward, sometimes others could not help but wonder if she treated military affairs as a child's play, of course. Yang Si understood that his lord would not joke about such things. The more it was so, the more terrifying it was because the possibility of tricking her was too low. On the contrary, the probability of being tricked by her was increasing. I don't know if it's fortunate or unfortunate that those feudal lords were born in the same era as my lord. Yang Si sighed in a low voice. Jiang Nongqin accidentally heard him. "Of course it's fortunate," she replied with an indifferent expression. Yang Si and Jiang Nongqin were considered friends who had a friendship boat. Even though the boat often capsized because of his lord, he still readily asked, "Why do you think so, Officer Jiang?" "I feel that it's a little unfortunate. No one wants to be born to be hit by others and lose consecutively." Jiang Nongqin's eyeballs moved a little. How many mortals can see a celestial being like my lord? Naturally, they have to rejoice. Yang Si was speechless. He was wrong. Jiang Nongqin was his lord's most loyal die-hard fan. She was a brainless fan. She was the kind of die-hard fan who felt that his lord's posture was cool and neat even when he saw her squatting in the latrine. He was really muddle-headed to expect to hear a more constructive answer from her. He replied sarcastically, "Commandant Jiang, you have a unique view." Jiang Nongqin turned her gaze to him. Her eyes clearly wrote 5 words. "Do I need you to say that?" Yang Si was speechless. After the army rested and reorganized, Jiang Pengji saw a few bullet screens from the audience in the streaming room before they set off. She frowned in her heart. Jing Rong has been quite close to Officer Jiang these days. "Why? Do you fancy her?" Yang Si was about to get on the saddle. When he heard this, he stepped on nothing. Half of his body hung on the back of the horse. His expression seemed to be empty. "Ching Ching Liuya. Streamer, don't ask so bluntly. You scared Xiao Rong Rong." Jiang Pengji had been streaming for a long time. It was almost 10 years since she appeared. How many 12 years does a man have in his life? Many of the audience had watched them grow up, from their tender teenage years to their mature and steady youths, and even to their middle ages. Apart from Jiang Pengji, Jiang Nongqin was the second familiar face who had accompanied them through so many years of streaming. Jiang Pengji could chat with them and get along with them more like friends. However, Jiang Nongqin was different. Many people treated her as their daughter. Just now, an idle spectator suddenly asked Jiang Nongqin how old she was. Everyone counted with their fingers for a long time. They were shocked to find out that the daughter of Yin Yang was about to become an old leftover woman. Although Jiang Pingji was good, he couldn't bring her home at night to warm her bed, sleep, and exercise. They hoped that as the Lord, Jiang Pingji would care about Jiang Nongqin's marriage. Han Yin Ningming. It's not that I despise Rong Rong, but he's old and has a messy private life. He's not suitable to be his son-in-law. Lin Mei Xiao Rong Rong is indeed getting on in years. Her physique can't be compared to when she was young. I'm afraid she doesn't have the strength. Xing Yuan Miao Miao. It's okay to be old, as long as he's strong and healthy. However, Xiao Rong Rong doesn't seem to have the capital to be proud. Jiang Nongqin was the daughter of the idle spectators, Yin Yang. Then, her other half was the son-in-law of the idle spectators in the streaming room. There was nothing wrong with this relationship. Jiang Pengji ridiculed them for being incompetent. Which son-in-law could satisfy his 850,000 in-laws? These were only the idle spectators who had grabbed the small bench in the streaming room. The number of in-laws who were not online was even greater. Jiang Pengji watched helplessly as the streaming room raced. She couldn't help but wonder if Yang Si was at his limit. In the past few years, his private life was basically close to Feng Zhen's. However, after relying on her, he slowly cultivated his moral character and character. It was not too much for him to occasionally steal from her, little did she know, whose fault was it for Yang Si's private life. It was all Jiang Pengji's fault. Yang Si was quite frightened. He kicked his feet and stepped on the stirrups again. He climbed on a horse's back and sat firmly. Why is my lord suddenly asking this? Yang Si was surprised. He didn't know why his lord would have such an absurd idea. Did he look like the kind of person who liked to court death? It was fine if he looked at his lord during the day, but at night, he was hugging a fanatical fan who only had the Lord in his heart. If he had a child in the future, would the child call him father or his lord father? Yang Si shuddered just thinking about that scene. Jiang Pengji said calmly, I see that you've been very close to Jiang Xiaowei recently. You've had a lot of contact, so I thought you wanted to get married. Yang Si hurriedly shook his head, as if he wanted to disassociate himself from this and prove his innocence. Although Jiang Xiaowei was indeed very good. However, Yang Si didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He said, Isn't it because of official business that Si has frequent contact with Jiang Xiaowei? Could it be that his lord couldn't accept Wei Si and wanted to be a matchmaker for the people around her to satisfy her craving? Jiang Pengji glanced at Jiang Nongqin, who looked calm and composed, as if she heard nothing. She dared to guarantee that with Jiang Nongqin's hearing, she could hear the conversation between the two. It seems that I've misunderstood. Jiang Pengji grabbed the reins and said, Jiang Xiaowei's early years were rough. I don't know how much suffering she's gone through to be where she is today. She's delayed her time and has yet to get married. I'm anxious to see her. Do I have to watch her comb her hair in the future? Over the years, there were many prisoners of war. There were female soldiers who retired and got married one after another. But Jiang Nongqin was indifferent. Yang Si said, Of course Jiang Xiaowei is very good. Marriage is an important matter. I'd rather choose carefully than decide randomly. My lord thinks so highly of Jiang Xiaowei, and Jiang Xiaowei herself is so outstanding. What kind of man can't she choose? Let's wait for fate. It'll be fine when it's fated. He said these words with a smile. Jiang Pengji also said with a smile, I'm indeed too anxious about this. When the war is over, I'll go to Jinling Pavilion to pick. Many young and handsome men will gather there. When the time comes, I'll find a reason to hold a grand gathering and let her take a look. Yang Si frowned after hearing that. Young and handsome men from Jinling Pavilion? Forgive me for being rude, but men who are still young and unmarried. Was there a second person besides Wei Si, the weirdo? If Jiang Nongqin really wanted to find a husband, she could only choose from the younger ones. There was an age difference of more than 1 year. Was she looking for a husband or a son for herself? Jiang Pengji chatted with Yang Si as she rode the horse and marched. What you said makes sense. It's better to find someone who's older and more considerate. Yang Si thought about it and said, My lord, you're right to think that way. It's just that those who are older are either married or widowers. I don't know how many times they've been married. It's not that I look down on them, but they're not worthy of Jiang Shaowei. You should at least find someone who's unmarried and childless, right? Chapter 1273. Yang Si felt very wronged. Only when Jiang Nongqin rode past him on her horse, she smiled and said 4 words. Smartass. Yang Si, unconvinced, he rode his horse to catch up with Jiang Nongqin and asked, "What do you mean, Field Officer Jiang? Did he, Yang Si, look like the kind of person who would have a workplace romance? Why did everyone think that he was interested in Jiang Nongqin because he was close to her? What kind of gaze was that?" It was clearly the boat of friendship swaying. Jiang Nongqin said, "Although the military counselor and I are involved in official matters, we don't meet frequently. My lord, you have a sharp eye, so you'll naturally notice." Yang Si said helplessly, "Can Commandant Jiang leave the lord in 3 sentences?" Jiang Nongqin said coldly, "No." Yang Si, the boat of friendship had capsized again, and it was all because of the lord. There is no way to continue living like this. This general understands that this is a misunderstanding. My lord was just playing around for a moment. I hope that the military advisor will not take this matter to heart. I'll explain to her later and clear the military counselor's name." Jiang Nongqin smiled. However, Yang Si had an illusion that his whole body was cold. He kept feeling that it was a self-defeating proposition. The tip of his eyebrows drooped, and there was a look of grievance on his face. Explain what? No explanation. Yang Si was indeed interested in Jiang Nongqin. The 2 of them were not teenagers. There were many things that did not need to be said. Just as Jiang Nongqin said, the 2 of them had contact with each other for work. However, no matter how much work they had, it was unlikely that they would meet each other every day. After all, one of them was a scholar while the other was a martial artist. She didn't understand at first, but she understood after a while. She wasn't against it and just treated it as love. Yang Si had his own considerations. He did not intend to reveal it in the near future, so as not to affect the state of the 2. The war was too dangerous. If there was a slight oversight, not only would he pay with his life, but he would also lose the lives of countless soldiers. To be safe, he had to at least wait until the end of the war. He never thought that his lord would play her cards out of the blue and ask him if he was interested in Jiang Nongqin. Yang Si was really frightened. He stubbornly refused to admit it. "I'm not young anymore." Jiang Nongqin smiled and asked him, "What do you think, military counselor?" Yang Si, he felt as if he had been hit in the head with a stick, and his mind was filled with the words "not young." Was he really that old? He always felt that he was in the prime of his youth. He sighed. So Si is already at this age. Does Commandant Jiang dislike her now? Jiang Nongqin joked, "No, I've always despised it. It's definitely not just today." Yang Si couldn't help but cover his chest. Could they still chat properly? After a while, Yang Si saw that Jiang Nongqin was still keeping pace with him and had no intention of leaving. "Looks like Colonel Jiang doesn't despise the old man beside you. The military counselor is naturally a dragon and phoenix among men. The so-called disdain is just a joke," Jiang Nongqin said seriously. "However, the world has yet to be settled. How can we be at home? Wait until I help the Lord pacify the world, then we can talk about love affairs. As long as the military counselor can wait, I can naturally wait." Yang Si. Was it too late for him to run to the Lord and admit that he was interested in Jiang Nongqin? He had to wait for the world to be at peace. He felt unwell all over. As expected, he couldn't stop talking about the Lord. Yang Si thought that the conversation was very soft, but he did not know that Jiang Pengji, who was more than 300 feet away from them, heard it clearly. Not only did she hear it clearly, but the guru in the streaming room who could read lips also translated the entire conversation between the 2. Then, Xiao Hui Tun Dun, mother of asterisk Kerr, Yang Si, this big dog is indeed interested in my daughter. He even pretended to be so serious just now. Goo goo goo, mother of asterisk Kerr +1. Yang Si, this big dog, who asked you to take my daughter away? Did you get my permission? Mo Yo Kwai. I'm so angry that I'm like a puffer fish, crying like a dog. Yang see this big dog, Lao si Jilianming. I just haven't come to the streaming room for 2 days. Why did Yang Si take Nongqin away? What kind of operation is this? Jiang Pengji was quite angry at first, but she could not help but laugh when she saw the bullet screen. At first, they called her Little Rong Rong and Little Cici, but now they all called her Yang Si and Big Dog with their full names. The salted fish in the streaming room were really a group of capricious goblins. The current atmosphere was relaxed and lively. There was no sign of nervousness at all. However, the enemy's scouts are so bold. Jiang Pengji frowned. Her alertness was definitely the strongest at that time. She would not miss any scouts within a certain range of them. According to her discovery, the enemy scouts were watching very closely, which was completely different from Yuan Xian's previous style. The enemy is watching very closely. I'm afraid they're going to make a move. After all, it was an army of 50,000. No matter how mobile they were, it was easy to leave traces when they marched. It was not easy to hide their tracks. Yuan Xian had an obvious home advantage. He sent people to watch so closely that Yang Si and the others had to be on guard. We'll deal with soldiers and water with earth. What are you afraid of? Jiang Pengji looked down and said, by the way, Jing Rong arranged for someone to pass the message. Tell Huayu and the others to act according to the situation. Although I don't know what's wrong with Yuan Xian, he can't do anything to me under the suppression of absolute military strength. Yuan Xian could indeed carry out the strategy of strengthening the defense and clearing the field. He could send people to surround Jiang Pengji and forcefully cut off the rice supply for the 50,000 troops. However, he neglected Feng Jin and the others. Feng Jin had led his troops across the gorge early in the morning and stationed them at the ferry. If Jiang Pengji had not ordered them to hold back temporarily, Yuan Xian would have been stabbed in the back. Jiang Pengji was determined to retreat. With Feng Jin's cover, no one could stop her. Did Yuan Xian become smarter after he slashed Nie Sun? Of course not. Nie Sun was still a patient who could not get out of bed. His condition was erratic, sometimes good and sometimes bad. Because of Nie Sun's absence, there was no one to take care of the military logistics. They could only rely on the deputy generals and ordinary officials to take the blame. It was a mess. Helpless, Yuan Xian could only find a temporary worker. Not long after the notice was posted, someone came to apply for the job. Yuan Xian glanced at him and said disdainfully, "You can't do it." The person who came was a man with an unkempt appearance. He was about 35 or 36 years old. His hair was casually tied with a straw rope. He reeked of alcohol. The clothes did not seem to be his. They did not fit him at all. After he put them on, the lapels were still loose. The overly long hem was lifted up and secured at his waist with a tie. This caused the cloth at his waist to pile up loosely. From afar, it looked like a circle of flesh was protruding from his waist. He was wearing gray and black socks with holes in them. The shoelaces of a pair of wooden clogs were broken and tied again. This person's appearance was unkempt, but the style between his eyebrows was somewhat similar to Nie Sun's. Yuan Xian subconsciously felt disgusted. "General, how do you know that I can't do it before you test me?" Yuan Xian sneered and made things difficult for him. "If I say you can't do it, you can't do it." The person said, "What if I can beat you with strength?" Yuan Xian said disdainfully, "Beat me? You? Yes, I think I have some ability. However, I have a final say on how to compete. A mere unkempt scholar dares to speak to me like this." Yuan Xian said conceitedly, "Good. How do you want to compete?" The person said, "General's body is as tall and sturdy as a mountain, but I can make you unable to stand up with one hand." In the end, he won with one hand. Chapter 1274. Yuan Xian had lost without even realizing it. He had no choice but to hire this temporary worker. "What's your name? Where are you from? Do you have anyone in your family?" Although he was only a temporary worker, he was considered half an official member. He had to find out more about his background. The person's accent did not sound like he was from Dongqing. It sounded like he was from a land of water and rice. His tone was inexplicably gentle. It was easy to think that he was a gentle and good-tempered gentleman. However, Yuan Xin did not believe that he was a gentleman. Based on his observation, this scholar had killed more than one person. The person cupped his hands and said, "I'm Hua Yuan. I'm from Nanxing's Ningzhou. I have no relatives in my family." Nanxing's Ningzhou? Yuan Xion's nerves tensed up. His tiger-like eyes seemed to shine with a frightening light. He looked at Hua Yuan with an unfriendly gaze. "Nanxing? Why did you come to Dongqing to make a living instead of staying in Nanxing?" Yuan Xian did not regret hiring the temporary worker. He was arrogant and conceited. Even if Hua Yuan came with ill intentions, he was not afraid of him causing trouble. The surname Hua is a rare one. Hua Yuan did not mind Yuan Xian's suspicions. Nan Man is still wreaking havoc. I fled to Dongqing just to find a way out. Yuan Xian was surprised. The situation in Nanxing has not calmed down. Hua Yuan said, "Nan Man is powerful. Before I left, I heard that in Shui and Yang, Tao joined forces to invite the feudal lords of Nanxing to a meeting to discuss a joint attack on Nanman. I wonder what the outcome is. Regardless of the outcome, the disaster of Nanman cannot be solved in 3 to 5 days. I have to find another way out." Yuan Xian felt sad after hearing this and sighed. Nanman and the northern borderline were known as the malignant tumors of the two foreign tribes. They had always coveted the vast land of the 5 countries in the Central Plains. Dongqing had escaped from the northern borderline, but Nanxing had long been destroyed by Nanman. He knew the methods of the foreign tribes. They were as cruel as uncivilized beasts. It was appalling. It was understandable that Hua Yuan had gone to Dongqing to survive. Yuan Xian tested Hua Yuan's talent. He did not know how Hua Yuan compared to Niesun and the others, but he was indeed extraordinary. Yuan Xian also ordered people to prepare a sumptuous dinner for Hua Yuan. Although Hua Yuan's body was a little thin, his appetite was not small. He ate 3 servings of food on his own, and the way he ate also made people wonder if this fellow had never eaten a delicious meal in his life. Hua Yuan ate until he was full. "I've only been eating cold water to fill my stomach for several days. I'm starving. If I've been rude, please forgive me, General." Yuan Xian couldn't get angry. After all, Hua Yuan's performance proved that what he said was true. He finished everything without wasting a single grain of rice. After eating and drinking to his heart's content, Yuan Xian told Hua Yuan about the problem that had been troubling him for the past few days. Hua Yuan said, "I've been on the run for the past few days. I've heard about Lu Shi's troops causing trouble in Qinzhou." Yuan Xian gnashed his teeth in hatred and said angrily, "They've gone too far." When he thought of the tens of thousands of soldiers and horses that had been sacrificed, his heart was still bleeding. He wished he could run to Jiang Pengji and fight it out with her. Hua Yuan asked in surprise, "I heard that the enemy brought 70 to 80,000 soldiers." Yuan Xian corrected him impatiently, "At most 50,000. Hua Yuan said, "An army of 50,000 consumes 500 dawn of food a day. How much food can they bring with them when they travel light?" Yuan Xian said, "They're using war to nourish war and plunder the Qinzhou grain depot to replenish themselves." Hua Yuan said, "Since the enemy is using war to nourish war, why don't you use the strategy of fortifying the walls and clearing the fields so that they have no food to take?" Yuan Xian was speechless. It wasn't like he didn't know about fortifying the walls and clearing the fields. He just felt that he could defeat the enemy head-on and didn't need to play any tricks. Fortifying the walls and clearing the fields was a method that would kill 1,000 enemies and cost 800 of his own men. He didn't want to use it unless he had no other choice. In fact, Niesun had mentioned it to him several times, but Yuan Xian felt that Niesun was denying his strength by preventing him from fighting the enemy head-on, so he didn't listen. Now that he had suffered a great loss, Yuan Xian knew that he was in trouble. Naturally, he had to find a way to make up for it. He asked Hua Yuan patiently, "The enemy has already looted half of Qinzhou. Is there any use in fortifying the walls and clearing the fields?" "Of course there's a use. The enemy has 50,000 men and horses. Consuming food is a huge problem. Why don't you set up a trap to lure the enemy deep into Qinzhou, cut off their escape route, and trap them for a few days? Hua Yuan said, if you don't do that, they'll do the same thing and cause trouble in Haozhou again. Yuan Xian's face darkened when he heard that. If Haozhou was also harmed, Yuan Xian would commit suicide as an apology, even without his Lord Huangsong's order to investigate who was responsible. If Jiang Pengji wasn't so rational and decisive, if she was a little greedy and unwilling to give up the results of the battle, she might really fall into the trap. The greedier a person was, the more they liked to take risks. This mentality was similar to that of a gambler. If he bet correctly, he would turn the tables immediately. If he bet wrongly, he would lose everything. Yuan Xian followed Hua Yuan's suggestion and transported the stored grain from the various depots to lure Jiang Pengji to chase after them. At the same time, he paid close attention to the movements of the army. Unfortunately, Jiang Pengji wasn't a kind person. She wouldn't be greedy and rash like Yuan Xian. They retreated as soon as they said so, showing no mercy. After all, Hua Yuan was a temporary worker. Yuan Xian didn't trust him completely. There were many things that he wasn't qualified to do. Hua Yuan, who had some free time, began to listen to gossip. For example, Yuan Xian's various pasts, as well as the unlucky guy before he applied for the temporary job, Nie Sun's love and hatred. General, did you really kill military advisor Nie at the front lines? Hua Yuan asked with a smile. He wasn't worried that he would follow in Nie Sun's footsteps. The soldier said, no, he didn't. The military advisor is still alive. I heard from the military doctor that his condition is very serious. He has been ill for almost half a month. Hua Yuan said, I've been with the general for 2 days. I feel that he isn't a difficult person to get along with. Why is his relationship with the military advisor so bad? How would he know? The soldier sighed. Our general is good in every way, but he has a bad temper. Young man, you've taken over the position of military advisor. You have to be careful. Nie Sun was almost hacked to death by Yuan Xian. Military advisor was really a high-risk job. Hua Yuan waved his hand to indicate that he understood. He was different from Nie Sun. Nie Sun was Yuan Xian's serious colleague. He was just a temporary worker who was begging for a living. He didn't have to put in his best effort. Where is the military advisor recuperating now? I want to visit him. Although Hua Yuan was a temporary worker, he had a certain level of authority. He naturally wouldn't be stopped from visiting Nie Sun. Nie Sun had already survived the critical period. He still looked very thin, but his mind was clear. He would be able to recover after recuperating properly. Hearing that someone wanted to visit him, and a stranger at that, Nie Sun raised his eyebrows. He coldly allowed the person to enter. Hua Yuan said that he wanted to see Nie Sun, but he was really just taking a look. The two of them only looked at each other and didn't say anything else. Until I heard that the military advisor wrote a letter asking his wife and daughter to seek refuge with the Yu clan. Nie Sun, who was lying motionless on the ground, didn't move his eyelids. He rolled his eyes filled with indifference. Sun's life was in danger at that time. I didn't know if he would survive. I could only prepare for the worst and settle my wife and daughter first. Hua Yuan smiled meaningfully. You're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.